Yeah.
Good deal.
So we are actually live now. We're going to fade in.
Good deal.
There we go. All right, there you go. Hey, everybody, welcome to Fish North Georgia's Livewell this Thursday night. We are glad that you are taking some time of yours, to spend with us. And we're going to talk trout tonight. It's going to be a really cool show. We don't do near enough trout episodes. It's something that's really popular in North Georgia, and we're going to cover it. I got two great anglers with me tonight that we're going to introduce to you guys, and they're going to teach me and you at the same time about trout fishing. Specifically fly fishing and stuff like that. We're going to talk a lot about that. That's something that, I've talked to the guys before the show. I'm not very good at, but we're going to get on that and have a great time with this. And again, to all you guys, what's up, Miss Jones and Kurt? We are definitely here. A little bit different setup than the live wells on the past. We're kind of trying to change it around, trying to make it a little more intimate, something like that, so that we're looking at you, talking to you, and all that. But again, we're going to have a great conversation tonight. Let's take out some business right here. This episode, this first part, not the entire episode, but the first part is brought to you by Buford Dam Bait and Tackle. 2595, did I say that right? Yes, Buford Dam Road, Cumming, Georgia, 30041. Dave and Alan and the guys, hey, look, first of all, they're specifically located right there on Lake Lanier. They got anything and everything you want to fish Lake Lanier. And if you're a trout guy, hey, Buford Dam is right down below them, and they got a lot of great trout products there. And they can stock you up. They're not going to sell you what you don't need. They're going to sell you what you do need to fish. And again, great guys. Go check the guys out. Buford Dam Bait and Tackle. The telephone number 706-429-7211. And we appreciate Buford Dam Bait and Tackle for their support. You guys go give them support. Again, you know how we are. Let's support our local bait and tackle shops. Buford Dam is as good as any out there, and we love those guys right there. So what's up, Alan, Ty, all you guys out there in the comments section. Again, let me go ahead and knock out our social media as well. Of course, you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and follow us. We're going to be putting some more stuff over there. Paul's got a mic tonight too, so back behind the scenes. So Paul's going to get to play.
And let's do this.
He's trying to get it all situated and all that. Hey, Fish North Georgia Facebook, the Fish North Georgia group page, and that's the one you really want to be a part of. Also, make sure you follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. And, of course, our Patreon, our subscription service where Ryan does a lot of one-on-one teaching and stuff like that. Really good resource that we're growing and all that. But make sure you go follow us on all those things, especially, we've kind of blowed up the TikTok here the last week or so. So we're having a lot of fun with it, getting a lot of followers and stuff like that. So we appreciate your time. Take some time, help us out, and go like us, follow us, subscribe, whatever you got to do on whatever platform you're on. Make sure you go do that. So now we've got our business out of the way. I want to introduce to you tonight my guests. We're going to start with the elder over here. One real cool thing we got going tonight is we've got kind of someone my age, so we're not too old. And then we've got a little bit of youth right here on this side of me. So to my left, Joe Kwolek.
Yep.
I said it right. I definitely normally I murder everybody's name, so I got yours right. And then to the right of me is Mr. Ryan Hartley. And we're going to do something real quick just to kind of let everybody get to know you, who you are. I'm going to let you – I've got a list of accomplishments and stuff, but I think it's better you –
Judging from this comment here, I want to know why he's Joey the Thumb.
Oh,
okay, Joey.
We'll get to that later.
Okay, we'll get to that later. So anyway, Joe, real quick, just kind of give us a little background on who you are.
So yeah, Joe Kwolek. I've been trout fishing pretty much all my life. I grew up in Connecticut. I think I caught my first trout when I was about 7 or 8. Belonged to a little club, little fishing game club in Hamden, Connecticut. My dad taught me how to fish. Started fly fishing when I was about 15, taught myself how to fly fish. So did that up until I moved to Georgia around 92 or so. Started fly fishing the hooch. Didn't know what to do. Got heard some things about Settles Bridge, this and that. So ended up starting fishing around Settles Bridge and just, regular fly fishing. Catching some fish here or there. Wasn't really that great until, a couple years later. Took a couple years off to raise a family. And so after my son stopped playing baseball, I'm like, oh, what do I need to do? I was like, about 2017, 18, I was like, oh, I can fish because I lived about a mile away from Buford Dam. So started doing that again and met a couple of guys like Big T and some other folks and really started thinking about this whole Euro thing because everyone's like, oh, you got a Euro nymph, you got a Euro nymph. So got into that and did my first comp in 2018. That was a big learning experience. And I think we finished last out of 20 teams.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. You do some competition fishing,
yeah.
which is a little bit different with the fly fishing that I've heard. So I want to make sure we get that.
And so I think I joined, can't remember when I actually joined Team Dead Drift, but right now I'm the vice president of Team Dead Drift.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the six major or the six biggest fly fishing teams in the Southeast, mainly in North Carolina and Georgia. I'm also one of the directors of the Southeastern Fly Fishing League. That kind of is the overriding they kind of run most of the tournaments in the Southeast.
Okay.
Other than that, I fish a lot with my son. We do tournaments together, which is great father-son bonding time now that he's older. So I don't see him as much.
Absolutely, yeah, I get that.
It's a great thing to fish with him.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. And all right, kid, now it's time to introduce Ryan Hartley to the world. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background.
Right, absolutely. So I'm born over here in Roswell, Georgia, Alpharetta area, and just lucky that my dad grew up fishing with his grandfather up in the Helen area. So his grandfather had property up there, and my dad grew up fishing Helen and out in that whole area in the Chattahoochee and Smith Creek and getting a layout of the land. And so since I've been little, I've got memories going up to the upper Chattahoochee and the WMA and getting to fish for trout with a spinning rod and my little camo boots from Walmart and trying to get in between the private property signs up there and try to find a slice that you can fish illegally up there on the trout streams. But luckily there's plenty of areas you can fish. And so I've got good memories going up there when I was little and just really got into it more as I got a little bit older. I'd say really big enough to crawl in the rocks below Buford Dam. And so before that, really just growing up fishing as a kid and fishing ponds around the neighborhoods and golf courses when I can, and just really diving into bass fishing because I really is what I was watching on TV when I was little and really saw myself as being a tournament angler. Like some kids want to be an astronaut, I was going to be a bass fisherman.
Yeah.
And so with a red convertible.
I understand that.
So, it kind of transformed a bit. And as I realized that my boating limitations were limited as far as not having a bass boat at the time, I really started looking for other types of fishing to really sink my teeth into. And so just growing up fishing with my dad, fishing at the Rainbow Ranch, which was a really cool pay pond with I'm sure a lot of fellow Georgians have memories fishing there. And so I've got
Is that the one that was right there on 20?
Yep. Yeah, it was right there, right by the.
Was that it?
So it's on the upper hooch. I remember 4 or 5 ponds. I remember there's a little brick building you'd walk up.
That's it.
And they'd give you a little like salsa cup, 50 cents of worms or corn. And you'd go out there to the pond. And if you caught one, you could not throw it back because the trout are so sensitive. And from what I understand, I didn't get it when I was little, but they would just divert water from the main river through a couple of these pay ponds. Yeah. They had a couple that were for them, small to medium sized trout. And then they had a pond or two in the back. I remember that had some real big ones if you walked to take a peek.
I remember fishing there, and I will tell you this is just a little life advice. If you take a girl to a trout pond and you want to impress her, don't let the drag down. I lowered the drag on one down there, and I got more trouble from the guy that owned that place because it was in the trophy pond. Oh wow! And I was trying to impress a girl, and I'm gonna catch a big fish. So I turned that drag down to make it look like I was fighting it a little bit. Don't do that. There you go. Public message number 1: if you go to somebody's pay pond and they give you a rod, you rent their rod. Don't mess with the drag. So there you go. Continue. I didn't mean that brings up a great memory though for me like that when you get into that.
Right. So I've got early roots in the area, I'd say, and really just growing up as I got big enough to crawl on some of the rocks below Buford Dam. I started learning spin fishing, and as I got big enough to wade in the silt, I'd start fishing with worms and spinners and really start to get that game plan and kind of that foundation of where are fish sitting in the river. Right. What are they going to eat on certain days, certain water conditions, certain temperatures. And so really just diving into that. I remember I got good grades on my report card in 5th grade, and I got a fly rod, just kind of putzed around for a year or two, putting like a live night crawler on it, just needed to get the confidence up, just catch a bluegill or 2 on it. And within I think a few years after that, I really started to, throughout, I guess, middle school. I'm just a year or two out of college now.
I understand.
So I'm talking
that.
about
Yeah,
middle school.
You
but
are young. You are young.
It was just a stone's throw away, it feels like. But yeah, really just started fly fishing through middle school, started tight lining in about early high school, maybe freshman, sophomore year. I started to come around some of these older members of Team Dead Drift, and some of these gentlemen from the old competition scene, and even some of the anglers that were just a few years older than me who were on the Team USA youth fly fishing team. And so those were some incredible anglers, and just getting to learn from them was just such a kickstart.
Oh, absolutely.
Just such a kickstart to my fly fishing and trout fishing, and getting into this whole tight line nymphing and Euro nymphing like Joe's into with the competitions.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all
So
that
it's been a
because
blast.
what's interesting is so far I've heard a lot of terminology just in our conversations upstairs,
Right.
that make zero sense to me. So you guys are getting ready to get a crash course on this stuff along with me, because again, I'm a bass guy. I've done a few of the fly fishing trips here lately with the show that we're doing, and it's really fun, and it's a great change of pace from the bass world.
Right.
I'm not converted totally yet. I don't know that I'll ever give up my bass fishing, but it's a different set of techniques and, terms. Again, we talked upstairs. You guys call it a indicator. I call it a bobber. It's a bobber. We're going to have that conversation.
It's a bobber, bro.
It is a bobber. It is. I know that hurts you guys. It hurts you guys. So let's do this. Again, thank you guys. If you have a question for either of these fine gentlemen, okay, make sure you put it down in the comment section right there. And as we can, we will read your questions off, because again, we want you guys to get as much information as possible, just like I'm trying to do right here today. So we're going to start off with beginning, because that's where I am right now,
right,
with beginning fishing. And of course, at some point, everybody's a beginner. You just kind of talked about it and how you learned, with stuff like that. I'm going to defer to you on this one, Mr. Seasoned Vet. Let me ask you this question. How does it make you feel when he says the older guys?
Yeah.
Don't you like that now?
I used to be the younger guy. I don't know when that happens.
I know. It's just like all of a sudden.
My brain says I'm 35, but my body's like, not really.
I know that. And everybody that comes in here says, sir. Listen, my body tells me a lot of things now. Well, my brain says, yeah, you can do it. No, you can't. Jeremiah Giles, fly fishing, trout, or general trout fishing. Tonight, Jeremiah, we're going to concentrate more on the fly side, just because we don't cover it enough. And, we are Fish North Georgia, not Bass North Georgia. So we're definitely going to try to delve into this, especially we get a lot of guys coming in the shop up here, and we weren't prepared for it. We've got a lot of excellent trout streams in North Georgia, and some that are just 10 minutes away from the shop. And so it's time to take a hard look at trout fishing, not only for our knowledge, but to service, our customers and stuff like that. So, Ben Van, does bobber size matter?
Bigger bobber is always better.
Well, that depends on who you ask. Okay, like that. But we'll get into that. So let's go to Joe, and let's talk about beginning setups. If somebody's watching tonight and they want to get into fly fishing. Okay. Let's talk about, let's first start off with the equipment that somebody needs. We don't want to get too specific, something that can be general for a newbie to get out and maybe go not only for trout, but also maybe if they want to go into a lake for bluegill, something like that, to learn the casting and all that. So let's start off with the equipment. What are we looking for?
Well, I mean, you don't have to spend a lot to get started. You can, start yourself with a 3-weight, 4-weight. We'll handle any trout.
And explain weight.
Weights are the different sizes of the fly rod. So the larger the number, the more stiff it's going to be, the bigger fish you can pull in, and it's going to be either harder or easier to cast depending on the size of the trout rod. So I like, for a beginner, you see questions on Facebook all the time, but what do I need for starting rods? And you'll get a gamut of anywhere from 2-weight all the way up to 6-weight. A 3 or 4-weight is going to be perfect for any trout in North Georgia.
Okay.
When I fish competitions, I use a 3-weight. When I fish the hooch, I use a 1-weight, just because I just like the feel of it. And most of the fish on the hooch are easy enough to handle with 1-weight. I've caught fish up to little over 19 inches on a one weight on the hooch. So, but the 3 weights are the kind of the basic. You can get just a basic reel. Doesn't have to be anything specific. You don't need to have a big drag or anything like that. It could be even a clicker reel. It's more about, getting your setup so you can actually start the process of either using a bobber or an indicator, or you can use stuff like the New Zealand type indicators, which are just pieces of yarn that you kind of attach. I think the New Zealand ones are a little bit easier on the fish because they don't make a big splash when they go in the water.
Right.
And the New Zealand ones, you can actually adjust them, because the biggest thing about trout fishing, fly fishing for trout, is that the fish are going to eat the bugs underneath the surface. 90% of the time, they're eating stuff below the
subsurface.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you'll have dry fly purists that's a great way to fish. You're just not going to get a lot of fish, especially on the hooch and stuff like that, where there's not a lot of bugs anymore. I remember back when I first started fishing the Chattahoochee, both at Settles Bridge and then even down towards Paces Ferry, when they actually had a lot of trout down there, I would get into these caddis hatches that would just cover my legs from the water line up to 3 or 4 feet above, up to my waist. You don't see that too much anymore.
Really?
Yeah, just because of
environmental reasons, silting, stuff like that.
Yeah,
okay.
and so you'll get hatches on the hooch, but they're going to be the little midges and stuff like that are just really hard to for a beginner to fish with. So going for something below the surface. It could be, a Pats, it could be a mop, it could be a squirmy worm, anything.
And we're going to describe all these things here. Yes.
So
Junk flies only.
Junk flies only.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. But midges aren't junk flies. But
let me stop you, because this is the way we work this thing. When I get a question up there, I want to make sure, of course, Austin Shoemaker, thank you for your question. I want to pull that up so I don't miss it, because comments will go. So as we get questions, when do you know how to change a fly in a competition? And we'll get to the competition aspect, but right now, when do you change a fly? Yeah.
Well, Austin, I think, is a little loaded question, because he's one of the best.
Do you know him?
He's one of the best fly fishermen in the Southeast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's just throwing you a softball out there to get you started, right?
I tend to approach competitions based on the river that I'm going to be fishing, of course. And if it's going to be a heavily stocked stream with newly stockers, it's you go for the simple stuff like the squirmies or the mops, or kind of a jig. Any kind of jig will work, like a little leech or anything like that will work. When you change it is, if you think there's a fish there and you're not getting a fish, right, change it pretty quick. I change probably, if I'm not seeing anything within the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, I'm changing.
I got you. I understand that. This is what's pretty funny. And I told you, as questions come in, they dictate the show sometimes. So got another question. I have no idea what in the hell this is, but how do you feel about using spawning sacks? First of all, I'll let you have that question. You know what a spawning sack is?
Yeah, I'm just getting heebie-jeebies thinking about it. So, what I picture...
Heebie-jeebies,
man. I'm picturing someone up north. They've caught a spawning salmon out of the river, probably with a snagging treble hook, because they're not feeding. They're just in spawning mode.
Right.
They cut open the belly, take the eggs, take like a pantyhose, and just stuff a couple eggs in there, a little square pantyhose, tie it up at the top with a little bow, put a bluegill hook through it with probably 3 different barbs on it, and float it under a cork downriver.
Okay. All right, there we go.
Now there are spawn sacks. Okay, now I was about to say there are some flies that they call sucker spawns. Yeah. That'll imitate like a little cluster of eggs, but that's made out of yarn and would definitely not.
So it's basically though a cluster of real eggs. That's what a spawning sack is.
Right. And I know you can buy like Potsuki or eggs from the store too, and so they might sell some pre-made stuff too. But I know some people will kind of
see right there. I just learned something, because I've never heard the term spawning sack. And we're going to keep rolling with some questions, right? Because they're coming in. Can I tight line power bait?
Yeah, that's my good buddy from college. So
what's up, Cody? Appreciate you guys joining us
all
tonight.
the way from Vail, Colorado.
Vail? He lives in Vail?
Ski Town.
Well, there you go, Cody. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Again, I love it when somebody out of town joins us like that. So
you could tight line power bait, but if there's a fly fishing hell,
okay,
that would get you.
That would get you.
Yeah. Honestly,
so, okay, all right. So that's
with the spawning sacks and the power baits, that get you.
Okay, hey, controversy's good on this show.
Mops are even controversial.
Well, I'm getting ready to go, because
we're here to aspire for greatness.
Is that what we're doing? Okay, well, hey, there you go. Felicia Arnold. First of all, again, thank you for joining us tonight. Would you suggest a beginner go to Atlanta Fly Fishing School or just go and try? And I'll let you answer that, Joe.
I would say get a lesson. We were actually going to Team Dead Drift is going to be putting on some clinics in the next couple of months. I think the first one's going to be for vets coming up in May. We may do one before that for just general anglers that they want to learn about it. So if you want to look at the Dead Drift Facebook or Southeastern Fly Fishing website, we'll probably have the links for that. But the clinics are easy because it's, you get your basics and you can actually start fishing and start doing that. But any kind of initial training or initial kind of demonstrations is going to be good for a beginner.
All right.
And could I add just a
You can
hair
add
there?
all you want, buddy. Go
So
ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as the Atlanta Fly Fishing School, I'm lucky to have been there a handful of times and had great experience there. I know that a number of the gentlemen that they have really heading up that operation, Mac Martin, Ed Chamberlain, are some absolutely incredible and knowledgeable fly casters. These are gentlemen that I've learned from for years. These are gentlemen that are IGFA world record holders. And man, do they have some stories. And that's just some gentlemen I've been lucky to meet through my involvement in Trout Unlimited. And that is a really cool compound. You've got an indoor area to learn, and then you've got a space outside where you've got a casting pond. You can go out there. And like you were mentioning the roll cast earlier with the mending,
Oh, gosh.
having just a little bit of water, even if you're not out there on the river, really does make a difference in practicing that roll cast or that mend, just having that water resistance to really, it's like a live scenario, because that water resistance as you pull the line up is what loads your rod for that energy to make your roll cast or your mend. And so basically long roundabout, but great.
Okay, that's
great school over there and great teachers.
That's high praise. I'm going to try to knock out some more questions. If you'll go up a little bit, there was a question because I noticed you said something about mops for a second. So before we keep going, I saw a question up here I saw it right there. Catch my drift. Hell of a daggum screen name. I like that. I guess you do fish for trout. How long do I fish a mop before I realize it's not working? Is the whole day too long? And first of all, what I want you to do, Joe, is explain what a mop is and then answer the question.
A mop is, I guess it's supposed to be a case caddis type looking fly, but it's pretty much you go and buy a car wash mop. That's the little things, and you cut them off. I bought one about 4 years ago. I'm still using because there's so many on there. Yeah, you just tie it on with a little dubbing on it to make a little flash, and the trout love them. Especially stocker trouts. I mean, they'll go wild for them. I mean, you can even get some of the big boys and some of the private streams to go crazy for them, just because it's just kind of a jack of all trades.
Okay. Now, how long do you fish it before you realize it's not working?
Well, when I guide here or there, I'll fish it for like 10 minutes. If it's not going to catch something, I'll switch. I mean, it's all about
pretty quick if that's on for the day.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. And we'll go ahead and knock out another question right there from Trout Trail Fishing. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. What's your preference, stock or wild? What's your thoughts on naming wild streams, specifically on social media? Let me just say this. We run into this.
We're going for the spice right off the bat tonight.
This is not a trout specific problem. Okay, there are guys in the bass world, and listen, not saying it's right or wrong, but they will tell you specifically where they're catching it, stuff like that. So if you're going for stockers, pretty much people know where stock trout are at.
Right. Yeah. There's a fishing report on.
Oh yeah,
North Georgia.
That's right. So you get that.
Can tell.
So you know.
Yeah.
Now wild trout. So I think that question is better geared towards wild trout. If you have found a healthy population of wild trout somewhere, and you get the guy going in with a GoPro and stuff like that. So you're silent. You're silent. What about you?
It's to the point where I'll purposefully turn off my GoPro. I aim it down. I mean, you could watch my videos, and if you can guess where I'm at, good luck. But I'm not saying it.
Okay, I understand that.
It's to the point where I'm happy to give folks good leads, because there are so many, and I'm happy to bring folks out as I can. Friend trips, but some of these fish are just getting pressured. And
I understand that. That's a good point. That's a good point. All right, now, so I think I've covered the questions that were in there. I don't see, unless I missed one there. I think we're to the point now where we can get back into the conversation a little bit. But again, guys, if you're watching, keep those questions coming. They help drive the show, and we appreciate you taking part in it as well. We were talking about
beginner setups.
Yeah. And so you said, 3 to 6, something like that. Does it really, you said something too I thought was interesting. It really doesn't matter the reel and the stuff like that, because I know fly reels can get really expensive,
right?
But for somebody starting out,
you don't need
an
expensive reel. I mean, you can get a bat and kill, a click reel, and be fine for the most part. I mean, if you get in some of these bigger fish on the private waters, you might want something that has a good drag, but you're not going to start learning on that most of the time. You got to start learning something a little smaller. So when I take people on these private places, I hope they get a small fish first, because that if they get a big fish and they lose it, they're kind of distraught for at least a half hour or so. If they get a smaller fish in, they're like, oh, this is great, I can do this.
Okay.
And so you can kind of train them through what they did right or wrong at that point.
Okay.
The bigger thing too is like when I run into people on the hooch or on Smiths and stuff like that, a lot of times the leader and the tippet that they're using are just too big for most of the time. I mean, there was somebody online the other day talking about a 20-pound leader.
That's a big leader. That's big in the bass world.
Yeah, I use a 10 to 8. I mean, mine's considered kind of small, and as we start talking about competitions, there's certain rules of competition where your leader and your tippet and fly can't be longer than 2 times your fly rod. So you can't have 30 feet of leader out there or 30 feet of mono. You can't even use that in fly.
Okay.
In fly.
So there are rules.
There are a lot of rules.
There are rules right there. So
right.
That's it. What about you? And since you're young, let's talk about your first. Instead of he kind of gave a little recommendation, but you're young enough to remember your first fly setup. So do you remember what it was?
Yes. So it was a 9'5" weight, and so that's really considered. Like Joe mentioned, really 3 to 4 weight is ideal.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself breaking fish off because I still had that bass hook set in me, just hardcore ingrained. And so when you soften that rod up, when you go to a 4 weight or a 3 weight, you're softening up that rod tip. And so when you go to give it that hook set, it has more of a cushion. And so it really allows you to use that thinner tippet, which is basically your 4/0 carbon or your thinnest line that's attaching to your point fly, your end fly. And the thinner that line is, the quicker those flies are going to slice through the water with less friction, less surface area to grab. And it's really the key to getting your flies down and catching fish on lighter stuff.
Okay. I saw another comment about sharing spots and stuff on social media, but I also saw the term high holes. Now, that sounds like a bad Saturday night to me, but in the trout world, what is high holes? What is getting high holes?
I think getting high hole, what he's talking about is like if you're fishing a hole and something goes right above you. Because most of the time, if you're younger like Ryan, you fish upstream because it's easier. It's harder to fish upstream because you're fishing against the current. Me, I'm a little bit older. I like to fish downstream, so I kind of run into people sometimes, and I'm like, "Hey, I'll go around you" and stuff like that. But
I understand.
You try to stay away from people.
Well, that's in everything. I mean, bass world, somebody pulls up in a bass boat and somebody comes right around them and stuff. So I understand the topic now. So I saw another question down there. Somewhere I saw something about and as soon as Paul's done, there we go. Where was it at? I think it was Cody again. No, it was down at the bottom, all the way down at the bottom. There we go. Do you prefer night crawlers?
Don't ask that.
Do you know?
He's a smart ass.
So Nicholas
is a smart ass. He's another one of the better fishermen in the
pronounce that last name for me.
It's Shirley.
Yeah, Shirley. Okay, Shirley. As it's spelled. All right. Well, Nicholas.
Well, I don't think actually no, you don't pronounce the R. I think what he said. So I don't know. But he's just being a smart ass.
Is that
so? You don't call him Shirley?
Ass?
He's a good smart ass.
He's a good smart ass. All right. Well, Nicholas, hey, you're smart ass number 1 tonight. We appreciate you watching us tonight again. But it's funny though. He says night crawlers are Euro flies, and we're going to do that. But let's be honest, guys like me grew up. You either were throwing a Panther Martin, or you were putting a night crawler and a couple pieces of corn on, and you're letting it drift.
That's how I grew up. Like when I first started fishing way back in the day.
That's it. But since he brought it up, Mr. Nicholas, what is a Eurofly? I have no idea what a Eurofly is.
Well, you're
Is
just
that
talking
a
about
technique or a fly?
that you're just talking nymphs and stuff
Nymphs,
like that.
okay.
You know, little size 16, 18, 20s type nymphs.
Joe will hi-ho you every time.
Yeah.
There you go. I like that.
Next time I see him on the river, I'm gonna
You're
cut
gonna-
his-
you're gonna let him
I'm
know
cut-
all
I'm gonna cut
that,
his
so-
leader.
That's awesome. Now,
bait as bait.
Yeah,
So
as
Euroflies are not bait.
Euro-
Euroflies are not bait, no sir. So on an artificial lure only stream, because there are certain spots in Georgia where you can only legally throw artificial lures,
Right.
And so that definition's online. I'm not going to try to hit it with you now, but basically, if it's salted, if it is dipped in corn juice, and
All
power
it's
bait,
bad, yeah.
corn, power bait, salmon eggs, pot zuki, you name it, that's not legal to use. I've seen folks using it. You will get a ticket.
okay. That brings up an interesting question, because I had a gentleman that came in here, and we carry some of the power bait stuff, and power bait has a worm, and he got a ticket because it was supposed to be artificial only, but there was something about the
scent.
power bait.
It was a scent.
It had scent in it,
Yeah.
and they considered that not artificial, which I kind of think that's a stretch, but you guys have your own rules in the trout world.
Yeah.
So
when it's DH and stuff like that, they really don't want you to use any kind of
all right,
scented
okay,
things.
that makes sense.
What's
that.
DH, Joe?
Oh, delayed harvest. Sorry.
Delayed harvest. And
Yeah.
again, like you said, Amicalola right up here from the shop, from Steel Bridge down to Highway 53 has a delayed harvest time, like that. And I know it's like single hooks, no barbs,
No barbs.
no
Yep.
barbs on that one like that. So I know a lot of guys will come in here and they'll buy a Panther Martin. They want to fish it just to fish, and they'll cut the barbs off and do a single hook and stuff.
You'll get
like that.
different interpretations. I asked a ranger once, "Can I mash it down?" And they're like, "No, it has to be barbless." And then I asked the guy at the shop at one of the other DHs here, and he's like, "Yeah, just mash it down." I'm like, he's like at the place. So I would just prefer not to have barbs on your flies if you want to go to one of those DHs.
Okay, all right. Let me go ahead and take care of a little more business while we're right here about the 30-minute mark. I want to thank another one of our fine sponsors, For Her Apparel. For Her Outdoor Apparel, Miss Jennifer, Miss Peyton. Again, guys, you see it right there on the screen. Got a website, forheroutdoor.com. Again, it's fishing clothing, outdoor clothing, and it is geared more towards the female variety. And we're trying to get more females involved in the sport. I know a lot of females fly fish. It's one of the ways of fishing that I actually see females taking a lot more time doing like that. But again, we want you to go to forheroutdoor.com. And again, not only go shop there, buy stuff, support them, but also they got 2 great events coming up. And I don't know the specific dates. You can find it on the Fish North Georgia group page. But I know in March is it March or February, the female only tournament?
In
Paul?
March is the tournament.
Okay, March
and
is
then
yep,
April is the clinic event.
that's
and
right.
we'll repost both on the group page tomorrow.
Absolutely. So they've got an all-female tournament on Lake Lanier. That's pretty cool right then and of itself. Again, that's Miss Jennifer's passion. She's trying to get more females involved in it. But also in April, Fish North Georgia, For Her Outdoors, and some other of the great fine local companies around here are going to be putting on a clinic at Mary Alice Park for women and children. For Her has graciously provided prizes and stuff like that for the participants, rods, reels, tackle box, stuff like that. I'm going to come say a few words, and I'm going to cook hot dogs and hamburgers. So lunch will be provided. There are ways to register. Check it out online. But again, we want to thank For Her Outdoor Apparel for their support. Ryan's going fishing with Miss Jennifer actually Sunday, I think it is. She's got a badass bass boat, and he's looking forward to driving it and all that stuff, so like that. But we want to thank them. Guys, check them out. Again, right now, if you look, can you pull that thing off the screen right there?
I don't know.
325 right there. So let me scoot over just a smidget. You see right here. Hey, look, I'm a guy
America.
right here. America. For Her Outdoors. You guys go check them out. It's not just for women. There's guys' clothes on there too. But again, that's her passion. They're wanting to get more females involved. And again, trout fishing is a great way for that too. But make sure you look up those 2 events on the Fish North Georgia group page right there. So of course, Miss Jennifer is watching tonight. Thank you very much. And 325 for the all ladies tournament. Miss Jennifer, can I identify as one and fish in your tournament? That's what I'd like to know. I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be fun right there. You never know what you're going to get these days. So best sit for a fly is to rub it in silt. That's an interesting comment.
Never did it, but
that's an interesting comment. Anglers are always looking for the next great thing. And all, but that's something simple. I guess his thinking is if you're rubbing it in the local area, the local dirt, you might get the local scent and stuff like that. Have you ever done anything like that? That's new.
I mean, no.
That's new to you. How about you?
I've never heard of that.
Well, maybe y'all learned something. Tonight. This might help you. 422 is for the Mary Alice event. Again, thank you. Jeremiah's got a question right there. Interesting. See, this is what I love about this. Like I told you before the show, I don't know anything about fly fishing. We talked about my limited expertise on that, which is none. All right. But when our viewers ask these questions, it's an opportunity not only for you guys to answer, and for our viewers to learn, but also for me too. So he's talking about sink rate right here. I'm going to throw this into you, Ryan, first, and Joe, you can pick up on it. What's the best sink rate fly line for trout in Georgia streams?
Right. So Jeremiah, I would tell you that usually I am using a Euro nymphing leader, tight line nymphing, which is basically the competition style, which does not really have much of my fly line even touching the water, if even outside of the guides of my rod. And so kind of like we were discussing earlier, a lot of my fishing is done in close quarters. And so really within probably, I would say a 15 to 20 foot range, if not even a smidge closer. And so while I don't have my fly line out often enough for it to really play an impact in my fishing, I do use a float tip line. And so that means, like he mentioned, you've got full sinking lines, which you might use if you were on a boat fishing for trout or stripers that were suspended off the bottom or a decent ways down. With the float tip fly line, I think it really allows you a pretty good bit of flexibility if you wanted to cast a single dry fly, or if you wanted to use an indicator nymphing, or if you wanted to tie on a Euro leader and just go straight to tight lining. But one thing I've found using that float tip, you get, it varies per brand, but basically that front section of your fly line, those first number of feet will float on the top of the water, especially when they're clean. When they get a little bit dirty, sometimes you need to clean your fly lines. That's the thing. Your fly line will get greased up or get some dirt on it and, start to sink. But when it floats, it really was an advantage kind of versatility wise when I went to Montana fishing in a lake and going from fishing fast currents to completely still water. Mm-hmm. You're just barely stripping in, which means
you're basically. Remember me telling you how I did that one? Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah. Right.
And so on this lake situation, you're basically trying to move that fly about that far every time you move it. It's just going real tiny because the bugs aren't swimming real fast like a bait fish or anything. And so you're just barely moving it, and being able to watch the tip of that fly line for any kind of little twitch forward allows you to really register the bite without having an indicator on your rod in some lake fishing scenarios.
Okay.
And so
it's a good answer.
I would say a float tip really has allowed me some versatility.
Now I'm going to let you answer that, and I'm going to throw another one on top of you, because Philip Hutchinson had a question kind of up earlier where he mentioned something about a Tenkara rig.
Right.
And we're talking you mentioned Euro. There's all these different things that I'm trying to absorb real quick. But in his question, it was cane pole or I guess a Tenkara specific
same thing
rod. Is it not the same? Because I said that's cane pole fishing.
Yeah. Cane pole takes the reel out of it. You just line from the tip down to the water.
Does Tenkara have a reel? Same thing.
You
So
just have
basically
a little spool of tippet. That's all you have down there. But you're pretty much from the tip of the rod down.
I got you. All right. So what's your answer to that as far as full float, intermediate, slow sink, or fast sink? And he says, I'm guessing float for most stuff.
Yeah.
And
if you're doing dry fly fishing or dry dropper fishing, then full float, weight forward floating is good. If you're going to get into lake type fishing, there most of the guys will have 2 or 3 different types of line, or two or three different cassettes filled with line. One being like a floating line, one being an intermediate sink, and one being a full sink. And that's really just to figure out where the fish are in the water column, because the fish throughout the day in a lake will move in the water column based on the temperature, where the bugs are, and so forth.
Okay. And so this is what I told you before we started this. We had this all written out, what we were going to talk to. Exactly. And once our viewers get going, you just got to go with the flow where it's at. So let's just jump back to your buddy Nicholas there. What's your favorite color mop fly? There's got to be a story about this.
Well, when I first started fishing started fishing, fly fishing back in 2018, I started catching a ton of fish on mops. Green mops were like my favorite thing because I didn't know any
Dark
better.
green, light green.
Just fluorescent, almost fluorescent.
Oh,
green.
fluorescent
It's
green.
almost. I mean, it's pretty bright.
Okay, so a bright green.
And then I moved to like a tan mop. Like a tan mop is awesome, but I mainly use two different types of mops, tan or green. There's so many different colors you can get into.
Well, what's your favorite now?
I would say tan.
Tan is your favorite now.
Yeah.
But you start off with a bright green.
Yeah, but I don't like those. I don't use them as much as those guys think I use them anymore. And you get
so
any
there's
of those,
something behind the scenes.
You get any
what
of those guys
at.
you get any of those guys in a competition, they're gonna have a mop on their rod at one point in time or another. So,
whether they want to admit to it or not, I got that. Your buddy Cody now again.
Let's take these next two in reverse if you don't.
In
mind,
reverse,
David.
which way? Which one you want to pop up first there?
So we're gonna go with Ron, and then that'll lead us into Cody.
Let me say this. I want to say this about Ron. First of all, viewers like Ron, you have no idea how much I appreciate you. You're here every Thursday night, unless you're fishing, and I understand that. But you always take part in the conversation with great questions and comments. So to all you guys like Ron, there's a bunch of you out there. I just personally want to say thank you. So yeah, absolutely. So what's Ron's question right there? Let's pop on that. He's a good.
So we're gonna pop this up and just kind of give us a quick rundown of the terminology.
We'll start with you, Joe.
Line leader, tippet.
Right. So
how that works.
You have your Euro line, your weight forward line. That's called the fly line. Then you have a leader, which can be made up of different types of sections. You're just kind of looking for it to kind of roll over and kind of give you good casting abilities.
Right.
And then from your leader, which is usually in a competition anywhere from 10 to 12, 13, 14 feet, depending on what you want to do. And then you go into your tippet, or excuse me, your sighter. And we don't use in competitions. You're not allowed to use a bobber. You can only use cider material.
I'm glad you called it a bobber there. I love it.
You can use cider material, which is just fly line that is colored differently, so you can see it better.
Right.
And then from there, you attach your tippet to it. I use a tippet ring to go from my cider down to the tippet material, and then if I use I usually use two flies in a common setup, and I'll have a dropper on one, and then the main fly on the bottom. I'll use a triple surgeon knot to tie the two sections of tippet together, and then I use a Davies knot to tie my flies onto the tippet.
Okay, all right. How about you?
And what's your line to leader then?
Okay. Do what now, Paul?
The line to leader is the first question. So
the line to
kind of
leader?
take us line to leader all the way down your setup.
He says the best way to connect.
Oh, the best way to connect. Well, I mean, I know all these knots and all stuff. They have like funny names and all stuff. Like it's not a blood knot. What's the other
nail
one?
knot?
Nail knots and
It's
stuff
got
like
your nail
that.
knot.
Nail knots or blood knots or
Any of you a perfection loop guy? You go
No.
loop to loop with your fly line, or
Yeah,
you can do that too. But that tends to get stuck a lot of times in the eyes of the fly rods. You want to go as small as possible.
Okay.
So yeah, right. So Ron, when we were at trout camp, basically every year the Georgia Trout Unlimited hosts
At one time at band camp.
and prior years.
That's funny. That one time at band camp, is there a story?
That's
All right,
funny.
first of all, let me ask you.
So I'll tell you.
Was there anything that we should know about trout camp that you haven't told your parents?
I mean, just little rascals. They run in my room. I'm volunteering, guiding these kids, and
It's
they'll run in my
okay.
room.
It's okay if you
rummage
don't
through my
want.
stuff,
If you don't want to say
steal
it, it's
the
okay.
treats.
It's okay if you don't want to say it. I get it. All right, go ahead. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
they're all rats. No, I'm just kidding. The kids are good most part, other than one. And when we're at the trout camp, basically we are teaching these kids who, for the most part, have never touched a fly rod. They're getting their first fly rod that first day, and there's so many leaders, so many flies, so much tippet and split shot that is burnt through and left in trees
Right.
in a span of a week that it would,
It wouldn't shock me. I fished before. I know how I am.
yeah, it would hurt some folks' wallets. But what they've started doing, Ron, to have the most versatility, I would say, is they'll do a nail knot from fly line to their tapered leader, and then they'll have about a foot of that thickest section of their tapered leader. And then at that, end of about a foot or, 10 inches or so, they will tie that perfection loop, which is basically just a small loop on the end of that mono.
Mhm.
And so that allows you to really interchange leaders a lot faster. And so like Joe mentioned, if you're trying to reel in your leader all the way through your guides to where, maybe say you're fighting a fish and you're trying to get that fish to the net, might be tougher to get that through the eyelets of your fly rod. But if you have an indicator, you're not going to be able to get that through it anyways.
Right.
So, if you've got a buddy that can help you net, or your leader isn't crazy long, it is, it's worth considering. But that loop-to-loop connection will really allow you to throw on all kinds of leaders very quickly.
Right. Okay.
And so that's what we found at Trout Camp, basically, is when these campers are making that back cast, they're completely, they're getting a leader completely hung up in the trees. It's a lot easier to just pull one of these fresh leaders out of a pack and attach it, because it's coming
with the loop.
It's coming with the loop on the end.
I
And so you
understand
just
that.
put that loop through, put the skinny end through the loop and pull that through, and it'll connect loop to loop. And
Okay.
So that brings us to our next question.
All right. Our next question is fluoro tippet worth the price, or does more tippet get the job done? Or mono? More mono. It's been a long day, guys.
Just like bass
Mono
fishing, fluoro versus
so here
mono.
we go. So here's the great question:
Yeah,
mono versus fluoro.
I love Trout Hunter tippet, and I use that like you wouldn't believe. I can't. It's hard to break any type. You can go down to like 7.5x, and you still won't break a fish off.
Okay.
So I don't know what's your favorite. I don't know what you use.
As far as tippet size, I'll usually use 5x and mono.
Fluoro or mono?
Yeah, I've used mono more than I should have, honestly. And so it's kind of been a good test run, because you go in the fly shop and you're looking at it, it's like $6.95 or $22.95.
Yeah.
I understand.
It'll work.
And so I'll go with the 6, but I'll tell you, I want to say Scientific Anglers has released I believe it's a mono tippet, and they call it Stealth Green. That might be cool if you're fishing a backwater swamp. We're fishing below the clear, Buford Dam tailwaters. I want it crystal clear, and so I don't have much confidence in that. But as far as the clearer monofilaments, they don't sink as well. So when you're fishing small flies, when you are in a competition, it's really ideal to use that fluorocarbon, because it's going to be 100% clear. That it's going to be, it's really going to slice through that water, because per diameter for the same strength, it is thinner. I believe.
As far as I know, that sounds
quote me
right.
on that, Joe.
Yeah.
But I want to say it, even if it's just very fractionally, but in situations where that water is going to be really clear, the fluorocarbon tippet is worth it. But on the lower hooch, I've really gotten away with using some 5x tippet, which is around the 5 or 6 pound breaking strength point, and really allows you to manhandle a lot of fish. And even it's really versatile. So is it worth the price? Sometimes it's worth the price, Cody. Sometimes it's worth the price. Fluorocarbon isn't always worth the price. If you're going after stalkers, you don't need to spend that $30 tippet. Just put on.
You're not going to lose it. You're not going to lose it. Use mono. It's sometimes we just use mono in comps if we're just going after big fish. We're like, we don't really care if the fish don't care about the size of it. We'll do so like 10-pound Seagar.
Right.
Like
they're not leader shots.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for wild fish though, that fluorocarbon might be the trick, because they're not playing around.
Well, and I talked to you about one of the future episodes we got is going up into North Georgia camping, going after the wild trout. And so I would imagine there at that point, wild, you're probably unless it's rain, you're probably in a crystal clear stream. So fluoro probably makes more sense on those, especially because they're small.
Right. And you could probably get away with a Tinkara rod. I know a lot of guys that go up there and just use the
I would love that. I'm going to try that.
Because you're not there's no river runs through it casting in those North Georgia streams, because it's.
What is that? Is that the shadow cast?
That's just
the famous shadow cast that the river runs through it, all that. Which it's still a great movie.
Oh, it is. I mean, you can do that on the hooch below Beaufort Dam, or even up in Helen area, but for the most part, those mountain laurels are just right there.
They are there. They're right on it. Is Ben Van's question the next one right there? Let's go ahead and hit it. Like I told you, them questions are going to keep coming. How can I join a competition or a team? Basically, how do I get involved? And I think that's your area.
So southeasternflyfishingleague.org has a list of all the comps that are coming up. It actually links you to fly comps. You can just go to fly comps if you want. There are several teams in Georgia. There's, I think, 3 teams in Georgia. There's 3 teams in North Carolina. Just depends on just coming to a comp. And that's how I did it the first time is I met Big T, talked to Big T for a while. And he's like, oh, this comp's coming up. I'm like, how do you do a comp? I'm like, oh, and it sounded interesting. So I was like, I signed up. And I met all these guys, and you just talk to people and talk to these guys from Dead Drift. And
so let me ask you, compared to the bass tournaments that I fish,
Mhm.
we bring our 5 fish or our 3 fish in, we weigh them. Kayak guys, it's measurement, in inches, stuff like that. How do you win a trout comp?
easy enough, catch a lot of fish.
So is it the numbers you catch, or is it size, or what?
It starts with numbers. If there's a tie, it goes down to size, and you can even, if you catch bigger fish but less of them, sometimes you could score more fish points and you'll actually beat the person that caught more fish. But essentially what happens is that there are sessions. There are 2 and a half 2-hour sessions. You're either fishing or you're judging. So
people are watching you, so it's not an honor system. So somebody's watching you catch these fish.
Most of the time it's all competitive.
With the clipboard and a Sharpie to record the centimeters
Right.
of every single fish you catch. 1, 2, 3.
Most of the time it's competitor controlled, where you go through a draw and you get drawn for either you're going to fish first or you're going to judge first. We have these score trays that go up to 70 centimeters because we measure them in centimeters. And there are also some tournaments where we use zip ties. So if a fish is bigger than a zip tie that you get at the beginning of the tournament, it's one measurement, and if it's bigger than the second zip tie, it's usually, if it's on some of these private streams that have bigger fish, they'll give you like 40 centimeters instead of 20 centimeters. Those are a lot easier to judge.
I got to ask you a question. It's just where my simple brain thinks. Why centimeters?
Probably because it gives you more leeway in judging and total fish length. So if you have inches, it's, 1 3/4 plus, whatever. It's a lot easier to do 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 3 centimeters.
Okay. Makes sense.
It's a finer measurement.
Okay. That makes sense. I knew this question was going to come up. And again, that's why I said we never make plans. We make plans, but we just go with the flow.
Right.
Peter P., both of you can talk about this. Can you talk about fly patterns depending on season? So right now, we are in February here in North Georgia. Still what I would consider winter, but spring will be here soon. I'll let you hit on the current, which, like, if you were fishing now, what current fly patterns are going, and then
Apparently a mop.
If nothing else from this episode, I'm going to know what a mop is.
I was going to bring some and put it on my hat, but I forgot.
You should have done that. So I'm going to let you take the now, and then when he's done with the now, however far he goes. So if he goes in the spring, then I want you to jump in and take the rest of the way. So,
well, in North Georgia, it really depends on if you're going to a delayed harvest or not, because you have, on the delayed harvest, you have a lot of fresh stockers, and the stockers are not the smartest fish in the world.
No, they're not.
They
no,
don't.
I will give you that.
And so you can throw eggs at them. In the wintertime, depending on when the spawns are, eggs are great. In December, January timeframes, they work great. They'll probably work for another month or 2 as well. And I'll use them all year long sometimes. I also like a bigger fly sometimes in the wintertime for my bottom fly, just because I just have luck with a little jig streamer, a little mohair leech type thing down at the bottom. I'm just jigging down. Sometimes just single fly it. The upper flies, I go back and forth between the Perdigons, the midges, any type of black or brown or purple midge. But Perdigons, you have different types of pheasant tails and stuff like that'll work this time of year. As you get towards the spring, when they start stocking again, the other rivers, again, it comes down, the fresh stockers are stupid. I mean,
they are. I got you.
I'll have days that I'll catch 40, 50, 60 fish on the beach. And
that's a great day.
They're all just stockers. And I've other days, like a couple weeks ago, where it wasn't that great. Caught a handful of fish because it was wintertime, just got clear, and I got a burp. Sorry,
that's okay. There's no rules right here. You belts were the best of them on this.
The hooch goes through a process every time from like mid-August through early mid December, where it gets all cloudy and pea green from below Beaufort Dam. That's where I
It turns over just like the lake.
Well, the lake, once the lake finally turns over in December, that's when everything clears out. But essentially, a lot of stuff gets caught at the bottom of Beaufort, Lake Lanier, and it gets flushed out the dam, and it turns it all pea green.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point in time, you can throw bigger the better, because it's cloudy. Fish, not going to see it as far as they can when it's crystal clear like it is now. So you'll go from streamer fishing in the fall to egg fishing, and then go down to like the little size 20 type midges that'll get fish from now until at least early spring.
So if you were going today or tomorrow, let's say going tomorrow, what's going to be tied on to begin with you?
Tied on, I'll have probably a mohair leech, a green mohair leech, probably size 12 or 14. And then above that, I'll have on a little bit 6-inch tag, I'll have either a perdigon, something with a little pink or red. They like a lot of pink and red in there. So any type of perdigon that has pink or red in it, and plus maybe a little collar on it.
Okay, and so that pretty much will take us up to about what time frame before we start switching into?
You can do that all year.
You can do that all year long. Okay, but it works now. But you can do that all year long. Okay, so I'm gonna throw to you in a couple of months. Days are getting longer. It's gonna get a little bit warmer. I don't know what kind of hatches, again, like that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna let you kind of talk about going, let's just say mid-March to May,
Right.
and I'm gonna put some pressure on you.
Yeah.
Because I got to go to the bathroom. So you got to talk straight. So I'm going to go up here and use the restroom. So you got to keep this conversation going till I get back. Can you handle that?
Oh, no problem.
Well, there you go. I knew that.
Yeah, man. So we'll get it going. I mean,
There you go.
and we saw one question up there. I saw one question just a minute ago, which I'll touch on. It says, do egg flies work? The answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely, definitely. Yes, they do. Especially if you tie a good one. And really, the definition of that is very loose, because, we've got Ben who's commenting tonight. He's kind of pioneered the trout brain, as far as I know, and that is just an oversized egg. Like exactly. If you can imagine like a ping pong ball cut in half. I mean, that's like the size of this egg. But I'm tying them probably more like pea sized. The way I see it, the two fish that you're really going to catch on an egg are either the fish that has been released from the hatchery, he's been hanging out in the water for maybe a week or two, and he has still got a little bit of memory of the good times when he was safe in the hatchery. He's been fed pellets his whole life, other than the occasional rare bug that lands on the surface of that hatchery, right away. They're being fed pellets their whole lives. And so the way I see it, they've got that round profile etched into that noggin. As small as that trout, the trout's brain is, I think it's etched in there. And so that's why I'm really a fan of throwing that, about a pea-sized egg pattern. My favorite color is peach. I know some people will use a neon yellow color,
white
sometimes even white. I've seen blue.
Yeah.
I've seen crazy orange colors. When I am mentoring the kids at trout camp, I'll tie, I think they call it a clown egg. You stack a little bit of orange, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of pink in there with yarn colors, and you trim it all up. It looks like basically a power bait ball. And but I'll tell you, it catches them. And so, you've got those stalkers that are willing to hit it, which in my opinion is completely from that, that reminiscent round profile of the pellet etched in their noggin. And then also, similar with bass fishing, the way that I see things is that, these trout in the winter, obviously there are fish that are spawning in the winter, and there are trout that are eating eggs that are naturally flowing straight downstream at them. But I feel like there are also days where these fish are cold. Their metabolism absolutely slows down. Although trout like cold water, when it's too cold, the metabolism really slows down. And that's when you encounter some of these slower days, like Joe mentioned, especially you throw in a little bit of gloomy sky, a little bit of pressure change and overcast. And I had and it can really throw the fishing off.
Okay.
And so I think in those situations, you throw an egg, and it's kind of like a reaction bite. You've got the bass on the cold days. You're maybe jerking a jerk bait right in front of their face, hoping that you're just going to get a reaction bite snap on it. And I think sometimes that is what I've noticed with an egg. You know, I've thrown an oversized egg at a pot of fish in December, January that really should have been just sluggish, just hanging on the bottom, not willing to move, and had a big one come up and just snag the egg. And I think it might have been partially a reaction bite. And so we had someone ask if the egg works. And so,
yeah, no,
you know,
absolutely.
the egg pattern absolutely works, but I would say I'm really only throwing that maybe 10 or 15% of the time. You know, a lot of fly fishing is match the hatch. We were talking about using flies in different seasons. And I know you mentioned March before you left. We didn't even get to that yet, man. I was so excited on eggs.
That's okay.
You know, once you get into March, to answer your question, I can remember maybe my first trip in March this past 2022 and seeing the first bugs of the year coming off and landing around my beer can. And so I remember seeing a mayfly. I remember seeing a few caddis. And so while there were bugs hatching off on the lower Chattahoochee tailwater in March, it was such a small quantity, or maybe infrequent day wise, or it may have just been the pattern for that single day.
Hour.
Yeah.
Man, I threw on an elk hair caddis that was 2 sizes too large and had a brown body instead of a gray one, and they wouldn't even sniff it. And there's fish coming up all around my fly. So I feel like there's definitely something to be said for consistent day-to-day action that really keys the fish in onto the patterns.
Right.
Otherwise, they can be kind of finicky with the dry fly action. And even throwing nymphs at those fish that are keyed in on the dry fly can, you know, it might not be as productive.
Okay.
But
There was one question there about like
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
five flies that you would have on the Chattahoochee and stuff like that.
What are they?
I mean, I have 4 boxes a lot of times, and I only use like maybe a handful most of the time.
Okay.
But I just have the options there. But I would have a bigger fly like a Pat's or a mop or a streamer or a little jig like a leech to have in a couple different sizes, maybe 2 sizes each. And then go into like perdigons. So you have the pink and pearl perdigons work great in North Georgia. You have flies like a pheasant tail will work. And then from there, it's just having like little midges, like especially on the hooch below Beaufort Dam, because they just have these really, really small bugs that hatch.
Right. When I was in Montana, you know, they taught me what they called up there, the hopper and the dropper.
Yeah.
So you had your grasshopper type floating fly, and then on the bottom you had a nymph. And so I would say that the majority of the fish we caught that day or that trip was on the nymph on the down. So but I noticed you kind of, in describing some of your stuff, it seems like you use that a lot too. You always have like a dropper kind of.
Well, I usually start with 2 flies, and especially in the hooch, because there's such different levels of water. You're always trying to find where the fish are. And so having the 2 flies separated, you can fish 2 different columns of water at one time. On smaller streams like Smiths or Tallulah, you might not be able to do that just because the water's so shallow. You have to just go single nymphing or dry dropping.
Okay.
Dry dropping is a little tougher because with nymphing or your nymphing, you can adjust your rod to get the fly to a different level.
Mm-hmm.
With dry dropping, that fly is going to be X until you change it. You have to physically go there and change it, add stuff or take away stuff. I was fishing a comp. I was judging a competitor, Michael Bradley, and he was fishing up at Fern Valley. And it took him 10 minutes. He started fishing a dry dropper with the fly down here, and he slowly took it out. And then once he found that level, he caught fish after fish after fish. And it just takes patience. It just takes reading the water and stuff like that.
Is that a technique that's used everywhere, or is it more of a Western technique, or does it matter?
Dry dropping is used everywhere.
Dry dropping is. What about the hopper and the dropper?
Hopper dropper is okay here in the summertime, like on the hooch, just because the hooch never really gets above 50 degrees, so you can fish that all year long. But a lot of the other streams in North Georgia kind of peter out in the heat of the summer.
Okay, so it's not as common here.
No, just because the bugs don't get as big. Okay. You'll get it. You can definitely catch fish on a hopper. I've caught plenty of fish on a hopper.
It's just interesting because, like I said, that's my experience.
Right.
So I want to know how it translates. And also, you mentioned earlier with the lake. You know, while we were out there, we did get a chance to fish the lake, and that was what I was telling him before you showed up. You know, fishing the river on the Madison, you're letting it float. You're watching your indicator. When we got to the lake, we kept the indicator. I'm saying that for you trout guys, indicator. Bobber. Just for the night. It gets called an indicator for the night. Bobber. But we would throw that out, but it had a nymph on it.
Yeah.
A little bitty thing. I mean, and I know you guys got your numbers and all that, but all I can tell you was I'm sitting there, I'm looking at that hook, and I'm like, there is no way in hell I'm gonna catch any fish on a hook that small.
Be surprised.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
Because 20 plus inch rainbows later, I'm like, okay. And what I noticed though was the way in the bass world, when we fight a fish, it's completely different from the way you guys fight a fish. We try to do a little force. We try to hustle with a fly rod. It's a lot more letting the fish play itself out. Is that same here or there? They were telling me. Let me tell you how they told me. When you got it, you're stripping. When you set the hook, you reel all your line up in your reel, and then you basically kind of play the fish. But one of the things that John that took me up there was telling me, that fish, when it gets to you, that's not the final run. He's going to see you and he's going to take off again. And so at that point, you just basically let him go. I mean,
you're not going to stop, especially
you're not going to stop it.
Some of the fish in some of the private places, you're not going to stop those fish.
Or you'd break them off if you tried to haul them.
I have clients a lot of times they'll just like clamp down on the reel. I'm like, let go of the reel. It's now gone. So it really depends. Like, but the stockers, you can pretty much pull those things
okay.
in.
All right. So I got that. That just was different to me.
Yeah. It really depends on the size of the fish and how smart he is. Some of the bigger fish, I see some of the better anglers in the league. They're manhandling some of those bigger fish in. Just because they know the sooner they get it in, the less chance that fish has got to run on them.
I understand that.
And then the fish is probably like, what's going on and stuff like that. And it gets netted. And
it's kind of like musky fish. And they said, once you hook it, don't worry about playing it. Get it to the net as fast as you can.
Yeah. That's my perspective.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. I don't know if there's questions above it, but I'm going to hit Ron's right here. Very interesting question. Instead of matching the hatching bugs, does something like terrestrial, like an ant pattern or so, work? And if it does that happen more during warm weather?
Yeah. I have a follow-up for that.
Yeah, follow it up. Go ahead.
Matching the hatch as a philosophy, are you guys believers or do you kind of go your own way sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah,
a little bit of both. Like I believe it, but my patterns are also general enough where I'm fishing them December to December, 12 months a year. And I'm
like, what is a perdigon? Like,
my brother and I joke around.
Yeah, don't ask me.
It's like, if we don't get bit in about an hour, there's something wrong. The fish aren't biting. It's going to be a slow day. And there's just fly patterns that, you use this. And I remember reading on the old North Georgia Trout Online forums, folks would talk about, like, basically, hey, you don't really have to match the hatch that much. You just get about a size 16, a size 14, tan or brown hair's-ear pattern or a pheasant tail pattern, and it's going to represent a lot of bugs. It's going to represent a mayfly. You've got stoneflies. You've got caddis. You've got midges. You've got, all kinds of other bugs. You've got the crane flies, which have these big old grubs underwater that look like the mop flies in a perfect tan color. And so you've got helgramites. You've got so many bugs to match the hatch with that sometimes if you can just dial in a general pattern, you really can
just get it close.
You really can't do it well. And so I've got a couple confidence patterns that way, but I'll also kind of switch out a hair based on the conditions for sure.
Okay. Yep. All right. I'm gonna have another question right here from Philip.
Danny, we got a question for you here.
We got a question for me. Well, let's pop it up. What is a mend? All right, let me do this. Let me go ahead and knock out a sponsor, Philip, and I'm gonna tell you what a mend is right there. I'm gonna thank a couple sponsors right here. First of all, we're gonna go with Red Bobber, and as he pulls it up, Red Bobber gear right there, www.redbobbergear.com. Guys, we all know about the iconic red bobber we all grew up fishing with. It's a bobber, not an indicator, but we all know what it looks like. It's a part of our childhood. And, of course, Red Bobber has taken that, and they've put it on an apparel line like that. So make sure you go to redbobbergear.com and check it out. They got stuff from infants all the way up to adults, some really cool clothes. I actually like their sweatshirt. I wore it on last week's show, got the phone. zipper and all that. Very good, very high quality stuff. Check them out. And also, while I'm at it, I want to thank Rachel Collins with 400homes.com for her sponsorship. Guys, if you're in the real estate market buying or selling, Rachel's the agent for you. She's one of us. She likes to fish. Good people, honest, hardworking. She'll get you the best deal, whether you're buying or selling. She will absolutely go to bat for you. Check her out right there. You can give her a call, 770-310-0599. And again, we want to thank both of those fine companies for their sponsorship of the Livewell. Now, to the question, what is a mend? Okay, so the first time I heard the word mend is in Montana. I'm on a Madison, which flows faster than most of the streams here.
Mhm.
At least it did with us. That's what they were telling me. You throw your line out, you're letting it drift, and then you take your rod, you take your hand, and you roll the line back up so that you're keeping, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're keeping the fly, you're keeping the indicator or the hopper from pulling the nymph down too fast. Correct. Easier said than done.
Yes.
Easier said than done. I got yelled at, mend the line. And I'm like, I'm mending the line. But the reality of it, that's what it's for. You're trying to keep your stuff in the strike zone.
It's manageable slack. You don't have to have no slack.
That's a good way to say it. Manageable slack.
You can have a little bit of bow. It's fine. You're always going to be setting. The biggest thing you have to remember as a new trout fly fisherman is setting that hook downstream as much as you can. I mean, there's certain times when you can if you're doing a streamer fishing and stuff like that. But if you're nymphing, you're going with the flow and you're setting that, you feel the bite, you set the hook downstream or set the rod downstream.
Right.
Because that's going to get that hook set there. But if you're dry dropping or streamer fishing, you're going to want to mend that line and have manageable slack. It doesn't have, like I said, it doesn't be perfect. It just has to be so you know that you have the least amount of line possible for you to be able to set that hook once that fish bites.
Yeah, because I will tell you a couple times the indicator had gone way on down, but the fly got to the point where I wanted, and I saw a couple of strikes that I actually missed, like you said, because too much slack. Yeah. Too much slack. So Philip, I hope you appreciated that answer from me. He's giving me the claps and all that. What was the CFM, CFS is whatever.
CFS.
The flow.
How much flow did you have in the Madison?
How much flow? Danny? I will tell you this. I don't know the specifics. I'll tell you what John said. 4 to 5 miles per hour. That might be wrong. I'm trying to go by memory. All I know is he said it was an extremely, compared to Tennessee rivers that he fishes, compared to the Georgia rivers, it was a lot faster. I don't know the specifics.
5 miles an hour is cooking.
I want to say he said 4 to 5.
I don't remember when I was out there about a year and a half ago with my son, and it was pushy to say the least.
Well, when I think when I got waist deep, there was a boatload of force on me. It's not like
as you get older.
Yeah,
hiking stick is great. I love my hiking stick.
I would have loved a hiking stick up there.
And I was able to get out in the middle of the river because out there, a lot of, I guess, most of the guides are just having their folks just fish on the sides of the river.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what's out there? So I went out there in the middle of the river. Yeah, it's pushing, but I caught fish out in the middle of the river. But it was dangerous. Yeah, but,
I remember
risk reward.
That's exactly. I remember what I did was I had to, once I got to where I wanted, I basically had to anchor myself down in the rocks a little bit to keep that. And some of the best spots, of course, are where the river bends or turns and you got a lot of current right there. And then you got that one rock like you were talking about earlier where you got different flows on either side, but you got that still right behind the rock.
That's where I found a lot of them too.
That's it. But it was so hard to get, because number one, and we're talking about the mending and stuff still, you cast up a little bit from it. And again, not a professional. You see that indicator, I'm having to use it. I'm watching it fly. When it gets to a certain point, all of a sudden it has like a turbo to it and it kicks way on down really quick. And generally it's right when you want it to get to that slow spot and all of a sudden it goes, shoom. Right. That was extremely tough for me.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes of the year, like the swing will actually catch a fish, depending on if it's throwing a soft hackle in early summer or late summer, especially on the hooch. You let that you're kind of letting it go down and kind of like swing through. That swinging motion gets that fish to kind of come up from the bottom.
That's right. And your buddy Cody just made a good comment. Any surface drag is going to lift that bottom fly out of the strike zone.
100%. That's something I wanted to mention too, talking about mending and like why you want to mend. And so when you cast straight across from you in the current, ideally you want that indicator to be basically floating the same speed. How it was explained to me is you want that indicator floating the same speed as a bubble next to it. And so if you see your indicator and it's floating the same speed as a bubble next to it, you could imagine, hopefully, that your fly on the bottom is moving exactly the same speed as something on the bottom. And that matters because these trout, like Joe mentioned, and like I completely agree with, are feeding below the surface definitely 90+% of the time. And so when something is just ripping past their face, it's like, whoa, what was that?
Exactly.
What was that? And so these, especially you've got wild brown trout below the Chattahoochee, they're probably not going to play that. I mean, of course, what's cool about fly fishing is you can go out as a beginner and catch a fish catch a lifetime achievement fish on your first trip, just because pure luck. That fish just happened to move out of his big hole right to where you hopped in the river for one day out of those 365 and you caught him.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it's really cool luck like that. But when you have a good mend and you're allowing your flies, with the drag-free drift principle, which is essentially like when you said that you notice that your indicator, right as you want it to get to the sweet spot, is just ripping through.
My
Just
God,
turning on the jets.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine when your guide is kind of giving you the business to mend, he's seeing your line create a U downstream, and that is from that faster current grabbing your fly line in the middle and dragging it. And so once all that tension is gone, you're a fixed point. So the only thing that can swing is that fly. And so once all the tension is out and there's that U right before you should probably mend, if you don't mend, that's when you're going to see the drag on that line on the surface of the water really rip your indicator across the surface, rip your flies through the bottom of the water. And it's not the kind of drag-free drift or on par with the other items floating in the current. You want that bug floating the exact same speed as a bug that's drowned and is rolling around the river.
One of the things I've heard stated several times, it's not necessarily it's the fly, it's the drift.
Okay.
You could throw a bad fly with a great drift and still catch a fish, but you throw a good fly with a horrible drift.
Yeah. NC Fishbone, again, appreciate you guys joining us tonight. I will say this. When I was on the Madison, I was not in a drift boat. So I was waiting. There were drift boats coming by. So my guide was basically just a guy that fishes it from Chattanooga. So he was just kind of in the general area. And but I've got a question, and this is something that I've heard in the store. Fact or fiction, I have no idea. You guys can lay in on it. We were up here talking about trout after the trip, and I was told that stalker trout in Georgia, if you want to catch stalkers, you're subsurface. Wild trout in Georgia are more apt to rise. True or not? And the reason that was given is because stalker fish are used to, of course, their meal being handed to them.
Right.
It's always subsurface, and they're just used to doing that. But it's easy if you're going to, like, if you want to dry fly across the top, wild trout will hit that quicker than stalkers. There's that factor fiction.
There's some streams, I would say, you throw anything at a wild trout sometimes, so they're like, oh, I need to eat that because it's one of the few things that's flowing through that river, especially the really small streams up in North Georgia. You throw a little, dry up there, and boom, they're on it. You're catching fish that are 3 or 4 inches long. It's pretty cool. But you'll get browns in on the hooch that'll go off or dry sometimes. Very few, but I mean that'll happen. But it's
for the most part, you're subsurface though.
Oh yeah, I mean I'll use a dry dropper to get a better drift because I can actually get a little bit farther away. If I can't get to where I want to go because maybe the current's too fast in between, but I know there's a fish on the other side of that current, I'll throw a dry dropper on and try to mend and keep that line out of the water as much as possible, just so I can get that fly to go through that seam or through that riffle to get that fish. But yeah, for the most part, it's subsurface. So you'll get a good dry fly bite on some of the streams in North Georgia. It's cool, and some of the stuff in North Carolina too. It's pretty cool.
So as a newbie, let's say I'm going to come in tomorrow, tell Ryan he's got to man the shop. I'm going to go up here to Amicalola and I'm going to fish. I should be concentrating on subsurface below, right?
Figure out how deep the water is, and then
let's say 4 feet.
4 feet. Yeah, well, it's pretty deep then.
Okay, it might not be that deep. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I am way messed up. So the Amicalola right up here where you can put in most of the part is knee deep to maybe middle of your thighs.
Yeah, so you're gonna want to, have your one fly, couple inches off the bottom, and then maybe the second fly at least in competitions it has to be at least 20 inches away from the other fly. But in when you're doing it by yourself, you can have them as close as you want. But having those two levels just to kind of see what's going through, and then have your indicator just so that one fly is maybe 6 or 7 inches below the surface, and then below that have your bottom fly.
Okay.
On the Amicalola, and then it's really just dependent on the stream. You're gonna have to change that depth of that indicator depending on what part of the stream you're going to be in.
This is for you. Do brown trout or brook trout score better in competition?
That's a joke.
Is that a joke? Do y'all know Ben Van?
Yeah.
All right, listen, Ben.
Ben.
All right, first of all, Ben, take it easy on me, buddy, because I don't know any better. I'm just reading off the questions.
Dead Dick, NC Fish Bomb, those are guys.
I mean,
Wild
listen
Browns
at
count
you.
double.
Like, come on now. I don't
said it.
listen.
It counts better
I
for the
think-
ego.
Is it for the? I mean, listen. I think you're having a serious question right there, and I don't know any better. So I do the best that I can. How important is your thumb placement when casting a fly rod? Is that another?
That's a thumb. So here
Is that a legit question?
No,
I've got my
get this whole
thoughts.
thumb thing out of the way here. So
I get because it was about you.
Your thumb. So I have one of these toe thumbs, and every time I take a picture with a fish, I take it like this. So everyone see, I say thumb for reference because people know how my big. So everyone makes fun of my thumb.
Oh, that's all it is.
That's all it is.
I thought it was absolute, like certain technique or something like that.
Well, there's certain things about casting with your thumb, and
I can't cast with my hands, and now y'all casting with your thumb.
Well, I mean, it's where you put the thumb on the top of the rod instead of gripping it like.
They're laughing at us
So,
right now.
Nick, I would say, as I'm trying to teach newbies to tight line, if they don't have their thumb on the top of the cork, I found
cork.
So you've got the cork, the handle of the
Okay.
reel. Sorry.
So we're not
Excuse
talking
me.
bobbers
We're not
and
talking
stuff.
bobbers.
But, I just want to make sure.
Right.
I
So
want to make sure.
So he's talking about thumb placement. I imagine that he's talking about how important is thumb placement when casting. And so
Is yours on the top of your rod?
for best control, my thumb is essentially right like that on the top of the reel. And so I tell someone when they're, if they're stationary facing the river, if they can just lift their line up and point their thumb
Where he
with their
wants to.
cast, it's kind of easy for them to visualize. And I really find that I feel like I've got pretty good sensitivity when I myself am fishing like that with my thumb kind of on the top. But I find that with your wrist snap forward, having that thumb on top kind of just locks in that cork of the fly rod handle. And so, have that thumb on top of your cork.
So he says index finger. So we're talking this one right here, right? That's your index. So index thing. I guess I see that too. And that's gonna jump into we can kind of
different.
That is different. We can kind of bring that full circle to this question. Again, my inexperience. All I got for a solid week was I was screamed at breaking my wrist, breaking my freaking wrist. I'm so sick of hearing breaking my wrist, but I did.
They wanted you to?
They did not. No, I was bad about breaking my wrist. Yeah. So is there a way that you can take your hand, however you hold, is there a way that you can do either here or with which one's better for being able to be stiff as far as wrist? Because I go back, man, I'm like this the whole time.
Right. So what I would imagine they had in mind when they told you not to break the wrist is that you're already floating. You're probably standing. You may, with the line that you had out, have been able to just raise your fly line up where there was barely any line on the water before your indicator, and then flick your indicator up, I guess.
They just raised tail at me the whole time. Said I was terrible, too much.
I think he was doing the river and survey casting.
I was, yeah. So out there, you could cast a good ways, but I always would break back, and it would create a snap or something like that.
Okay,
it's more about pushing. It's more about pushing.
You said that pushing.
Yeah, you want to push and pull, and then you want to feel the line load onto the
cast from the elbow. Oh, yeah. See, I mean that's just. But as a bass guy, that's not natural.
Right.
That is so unnatural to me.
It takes years.
So sometimes
years. Great. That's good to know.
Sometimes folks will break that wrist, and the angle of their rod, they're breaking it too late, where that fly line is just completely smacking the water. And so part of the reason I could picture they may have mentioned that to you is maybe you're breaking your wrist a little late, and that line and
No,
indicator is just
dude,
kind of darting down at the water.
It was all over the place.
Ideally, if you're able to break that wrist or a little bit earlier in your cast, the leader, your indicator, your whole rig perfectly uncurls in the air, lands on the water softly, and you're able to get your good drift going and focus on mending. But yeah, you definitely don't want to slap the water with. So, shoulder angle, especially if you're in a
That's
boat.
what she said. Listen,
Um,
you got to watch these comments, man. These guys get to having fun. Before I get to Crin Dog 85, which again, buddy, I appreciate your comment and your question right there. I'm going to
Joe, what did you do?
what the hell is beats?
So in competitions, the river is divided up into sections, and they're called beats.
Okay.
You're trying to make them as fair as possible. And this last comp, I was told to go and make a beat down at the end of Fern Valley, make beat 5, and I didn't go far enough. And so it was a really small beat, had some fish in it. I caught fish in it. I don't know what these guys are talking about, because I had to fish that beat. I drew it, and then I had to fish that beat. So,
I like that comment. I caught fish. I don't know what the hell
I
you guys
don't know
are
what
doing. That's
what's your
exactly what
problem?
this is.
That's a them problem.
Cren Dog. I don't know what your problem is, Kevin. So
Yeah. Oh, so
Yeah.
you know Crin Dog?
yeah.
Oh, again. So where is Kevin from?
Kevin lives down here. So
Oh, Kevin, appreciate you joining us
Yeah.
tonight, buddy. Thank you very
I
much.
told you all my
You
teammates,
said it, you
they're
did.
going to be smart asses.
I'm noticing some new names in the comment section. That's good though.
So no, I listened. I was listening to one of the guys that guides up there all the time, and I didn't go. I thought I was where I was supposed to be with the bottom of the beat, because you just mark it with little flags, so that because you can't fish outside your beat. A fish can go outside your beat, but you can't. If
you hook it and it goes down, it's okay as long as you got them hooked.
but you got to bring them back into your beat to land.
Right. I got you. That's interesting. How do you ensure beats in a comp are fair though? No, that's
a good question, because there are not every river is going to be different, and a lot of the rivers will have kind of dead spots where the fish just won't hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times the person that's doing the beat will have to fish the river to figure out, okay, should I include this hole in this beat, or should it be in the next beat?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you're trying to do when you make the beats fair.
I love the absolute difference in terminology between the different genres of fishing.
Yeah.
Just seriously, like, we've covered today, indicator, bobber, but beats, that's a different word that I haven't heard that yet.
Here's a question.
Throw it out there,
tie
Paul.
us back to the earlier, like kind of more beginner centric.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at a hole or you look at a piece of water, what is it that makes a fish decide to use that piece of water or piece of river compared to another piece?
Yeah. And before you answer that, I just want to tell everybody we've got a mic. We've provided Paul with a mic finally on the back side so that he can chime in.
It was a bad decision.
It was a bad. No,
There's no
it's
camera.
It's a great decision. But what you guys in the comment section, I just want to make sure that you guys can hear Paul good, like the rest of these mics. So just make sure you give us a thumbs up or something that you can hear Paul, because that's the first time we've done it. But I'm glad he's got the mic back there. So now you can answer that question if you remember it.
It comes down to fish are lazy. They're going to go to the place in the stream that is closest to where they think the food's going to come. Competition. Yeah. If there's a bigger fish or there's a lot of fish, they're going to move to another spot in the river. The way I do it, and you'll probably get 6 different answers from these yahoos on the chat.
That's okay. I want yours.
When I look at a beat, there's usually 1 or 2 good holes in each of these beats. And so as a team, we'll usually do team, you'll have a teammate. And so we'll usually divide that into, you take that hole, and I'll usually dissect it into thirds, the river into thirds. And I'll take the first third near me, fish that. If I don't get anything, move a little farther into the river, fish that. And depending on if it's a big hole, that I'll just try to fish all around the hole. But if it's just a run, I'll just do the river in thirds.
Okay.
And then some people will work from top down. I don't do that. I mean, I probably should. I probably better. Like you work from the top layers of the water down to the bottom layers. I usually just start at the bottom, but
I got that. That's okay. NC Fishbum again. Great. Hey, I learned something tonight again. Beats is a term the Scottish used. So there we go. So now you know where did beat? As long as he's correct, we're just going to take his take it that he's correct right there. So Cody's got a question, and again, this is for somebody like me. Does earth tone coloring make a difference on the river? Can you get away with wearing a highlighter yellow colored jacket? I kind of feel like there's something behind that question, but again, I see this in the bass world too. Guys will dress if it's a blue sky, they'll wear blue shirts. If it's overcast, they'll wear a little dark, stuff like that. How important is that in trout fishing? And that goes to either one of you guys, coloring.
Right. I like wearing drab clothing for sure. And so occasionally in the summer, if I'm just feeling fun, I'll wear a light blue Columbia shirt or something like that, or
You ever
coral
fish
or
naked?
something, but nothing
I just
like
want to
that.
throw that out there. I'm
Man,
just curious.
That sounds like a whole lot of fun.
There was a tournament a couple years ago where
Shrinkage.
there was a tournament a couple years ago where some guy showed up, and I won't say the name because he might be listening.
Is he listening?
I don't know, but he wasn't in the tournament. But he showed up and started fishing in his tighty whiteys.
Oh,
Really?
I probably could tell you who that is.
Yeah, you
I can
probably
picture that rascal.
I do
There's
that.
a few characters in our trout community. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that.
That was a shock to see that kind of come through the water.
Okay. Well, let's go with this. An off topic
Waiters,
question.
that's for
What
chumps.
is the strangest thing you have ever seen while trout fishing? And the reason I'm going to throw that out there is we had a
there's
guest
so
a
many
while
things.
back that was talking. Was it you?
Me.
Were the people making out on the bridge or below the bridge?
Naked photo shoot. She was
Naked
fully
photo
nude
shoot.
on the
Oh.
bridge trestle at Settles on a Saturday morning.
Mhm.
Holy cow!
So
She didn't get tetanus. She had a tetanus shot. Hopefully.
That's bold.
I don't know if she
Unclear.
had a tetanus, but from what I heard is Paul took a long time to do that beat. That beat took a long time for Paul to get through.
I
That's what
was
heard.
thorough.
You were thorough with it. Honestly, what's the
Strange.
strangest thing or strangest situation you've ever been in while trout fishing?
I think the coolest situation was I was fishing up in North Carolina and the herd of elk crossed right above me.
Yeah, that would be
So-
cool.
So there was like 30, 40 elk in the
I had a moose in Montana.
nice
That's a big
We had
ass
a
creature.
coyote come out right down the river to my son and I, and he came all the way down until he was like 10 feet away from me and just went out. You didn't. I'm like, I'm right here. You don't see.
Yeah,
me.
a herd of elk would be absolutely
Yeah, that was pretty
amazing
cool.
to watch. What about you, young buck?
Right. So I've been driving up our little mountain roads and literally off of pretty much a cliff had a 300+ pound black bear just come over the edge of the road, 2 or 3 lunges, and he clears the whole road, leaps up a few feet up another sheer bank, 'cause
Yeah.
they just putting these mountain roads in, basically on a mountain.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so to just see this,
Where are
animal-
you? Where do you live?
I'm down here in Cherokee County, Woodstock, so we don't get many
That's what I
black
was going to
bears.
say. You don't get a lot of black bear
No,
where you're
sir.
from. You get them
No.
every once in a while like that.
And
So
so to see that and see the body mass with the jiggle, and then it goes up, it just took a few steps uphill, stood straight up on its hind legs and wrapped its arm around a tree and looked down at us.
that sounds like a bad Saturday
And-
night up here in Pickens County.
Man, so that,
There's a lot of
but,
good bikini hatches on the hooch during the
Yes,
summertime.
sir.
I bet there is.
Yeah, that's fun.
Have you had now? Listen, this was of course bass fishing, but have you seen the yoga on the what is them boards? They're not surfboards.
paddleboard yoga?
Paddle
No,
boards.
they
Have
don't
you-
do
have
that.
you not-
no.
We were actually filming up here at Big Canoe, and we come out of a cove and we saw these women come by in the paddle boards. We're like, what the hell are they doing? And we didn't pay. We're fishing, but we got around. They're in a circle doing yoga.
on the water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I will tell you this: we're not talking about bikini quality at the time. For those of you that are a Big Canoe, I'm not insulting the females up there, except for they were just a few that I was concerned about with the paddleboard. That's just all I'm going to say. Very interesting right there. Just I was worried about their health. That's all. Ever tried drop shotting nymphs with split shot? I read about it in a copy of Fly Fisherman magazine when I was coming back from the Bahamas.
It works well if you're guiding and you're trying to get your fly down. If it's really rough or fast water, you can't use drop shots in competitions.
Okay.
So the weights have to be a fly.
Okay, I got you. How about
So-
you?
Yeah, I would say lean into it, I would say lean into it, bump bottom, lose those flies on the bottom. I've got a good friend in the Georgia community, nickname is Dredger, and he's got that nickname because
Dredger.
he
Oh,
Namaste.
dredges the bottom. We're talking 2 split shot, 3 split
yeah.
shot.
If something's going to be
Whatever
in
it
the
takes.
water, I want to have a hook on it.
And
Okay,
so
I understand that. That makes sense. Yeah.
throw a heavy anchor fly. You know,
That's why
you can tie some leader flies that have a weighted body or a tungsten bead. And so I'll tie my own anchor flies that way and get them down to the bottom. I'll tie them upside down so that way, you know, that the I guess the back of the fly is bumping off the rocks and the hook isn't really catching under. And even just when I accidentally flick it in a tree, just tying the hook upside down like that, I found that it will hang on the limb a lot less.
Yeah, Ben made that comment too. If you're going to do the drop shot, you might as well use a weighted fly and double nymph it and all that stuff.
Because what if there's a big fish on the bottom and you just bump him in the head with a free split shot?
That's
you know?
right.
Hit him with the anchor fly. You know,
big fish, big meal.
That's
practice
right.
Drift, lift. You know, lead your flies upstream. If you see your hole and the water's moving fast, you make that cast. You know, you can kind of gauge it. Start casting upstream a little bit further and, you know, until you're confident that those flies have had enough time coming down through that fast current to sink into that deep pocket and really hit the sweet spot.
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
You haven't hit the sweet spot.
I want to make sure, as we're getting a little on into the program, I want to make sure I take time to hit our last sponsor, Mr. Jason Sayers with J&S Contracting, Elite Pressure Washing and Landscaping, lives down in the Oconee area, the Lake Country down there. Guys, if you're doing any kind of remodeling or any home improvement from your landscape all the way up to your house, you need to hit Jason right there, 706-816-2049. He fishes some of the BFLs or Toyotas. I forget which one, but guys, you need to follow him. I think it's Toyotas he's fishing this year. I'm not 100% sure. But again, if you got anything to do with your house, again, so we're talking pressure washing, landscaping, all the way up to remodeling, decks, anything like that, Jason Sayers with J&S Contracting is the guy you need to call. He's good people. We wouldn't put him on here if he wasn't. 706-816-2049. And again, Jason, Red Bobber, Rachel Collins, For Her Outdoors, and, of course, Buford Dam Bait and Tackle. We want to, again, from the guys here at Fish Storm Church, to say thank you for your sponsorship of the Livewell. Couldn't do it without you guys, and we appreciate you. I'm going to ask this question. I think it's a loaded question, given your friends that are on here tonight. I don't know.
Most likely be a loaded question.
But other than when you were fishing in the bikini stretches, the bikini beats, have you ever caught a chub? What was it on? What? Chub on what now? Have you ever caught a chub on a Euro fly?
I caught a chub, yes.
Only the biggest
I
horny
actually
heads.
caught a hellbender last comp up North Carolina.
Oh, no way.
Oh, that would be
It was
cool.
like a foot-long hellbender.
That is a big-ass lizard.
I've not seen one yet in person. I can't wait.
Yeah.
They call them snot otters.
Oh, yeah, they were just
Snot
slimy.
otters. They're just
it was
The
slimy.
size of an
Oh.
otter.
did you
and
touch
just
it?
gooey.
I had to get my. I was trying to get my fly, so I was trying to like hold it. It didn't like. It was like trying to bite me. So
Bucket list right
That
there.
is
I'm
one
jealous.
ugly
They're
prehistoric.
wild critters.
They
You'll
are.
never forget the first time you see one.
Yeah, and the thing about it, and that's one of the reasons why they tell people, hey, don't go up and start stacking these rocks
Oh,
like
yeah, I
people
always
do.
knock them
I
down.
ain't figured out the rock stacking craze. I don't know why you guys do it, but whatever. Teach his own.
I knock them down every time I see them.
Yeah, but a lot of people say when you start pulling rocks out of a river, you're messing up the hellbenders,
Yep.
Habitat like that. So,
Mhm.
if we got any more questions, what's
this-
Ty?
there was a good one.
The Thai one.
Can you fish trout year round?
I'd like to pile on this one a little bit
Okay,
as well.
so
Um,
you go ahead and read the whole thing and pile on the rest of what you got going on there, Paul.
Can you trout fish year round?
Yes.
Briefly describe
Some-
delayed
some-
harvest. We touched on that earlier.
Mhm.
Do you need a trout license?
Yes.
What should you know before fishing the hooch below Lanier, the Buford tailwater? And just briefly, I know this is generally verboten, but if we could name check a few places that are beginner friendly, that have public access where you're not going to get run off or run into private property signs or whatever,
Or get shot at.
And we're talking
That's-
pretty much the hooch.
or get shot at.
So a
to-
couple things.
just to go fishing.
Trout will start becoming inactive around 65-degree water temperature. Anything above 68 is really kind of bad for trout.
Okay.
The hooch below Buford Dam never really gets above 50-ish, 52 degrees because it comes out of the bottom, so it's a great trout stream all year long.
Mm-hmm.
It's better when they stock because there's more stupid fish in there.
I
But
understand that.
this time of year, there's only just a lot of the native rainbow or native brooks and the smart rainbows that blasted. I think they did stock before Christmas, so there's some there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely need a trout license. Below Buford Dam, all the way down to the Highway 20 bridge, you do need a life vest. And if you're new, you have to have that. Plus, put cleats on or felts, and I use a walking stick, but I still fall all the time. So the water's cold too. I use one of those inflatable ones, so I don't have it where it's automatic because I fall in all the time. I don't want to, just going off. So I have the manual one, but definitely important to do that. And what was the other thing?
Like explain delayed harvest, and then also some places that the public can go and have access to without getting run off.
So delayed harvest, there are
5 or 6.
5 or 6, 2 or 3 streams and a couple lakes that have delayed harvest.
I know Amacolola's one has
Amacolola,
Chattooga, Smith,
Chattooga, and then I believe they do. I don't know if they put
Amacolola, Chattooga, Smith.
Did we got some below?
Below
Morgan this year.
Yeah, they have whitewater. They have down in whitewater.
Right.
Chattahoochee this year.
Those are striper baits right there. That's striper feeding.
I understand that.
So good places that goes from November 1st till April 15 or April 1st or something like that. I'm not quite sure the dates, but they
it's generally during the winter time.
In the winter time, most of the time it's catch and release.
Mm-hmm. Single barbless.
Barbless.
That's right. Single hook barbless at some places.
Right.
Yeah. No corn, no
nothing.
night crawlers being thrown on this one.
Definitely artificial.
Yeah.
Catch and release only.
And there's some places where even if you have a barbed hook on you, you'll get a ticket, even if you're not using it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've heard that for like scented baits as well.
Yeah, kind of like the Berkeley stuff I was talking about.
If you start, because I think below 20 is supposed to be artificial only.
Yeah.
So if you're a hooch tailwater guy, if
So-
you put in it if you put in at Buford and you go all the way to McGinnis, for example, and you get below 20 and you've got power bait or something with you,
artificial
you can get in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. So
And then the places for public access, Helen is a good place, downtown Helen.
Mm-hmm.
When they stop,
Got some good food there too.
when they stop, because right now it's probably been picked dry.
Yeah, and they have that big competition there every year. That tournament.
So it's fun going the week after when you catch all the ones that are. they
and also,
good point right there. I like that.
Come the spring, the Department of Natural Resources will send out a weekly email called the Stocking Report.
They do. I get that.
And it's as simple as Googling Georgia, weekly trout stocking report.
There's a lot of rivers they stock. I mean,
they do.
You submit your email, and they send you an email once a week during the main stocking season, and even in the winter, as they're
some streams
more infrequently stocking, they're still sending out a report. And so in the summer, you click on that. It shows you the county. It shows you the body of water. You can tell, like Joe said, White County, Chattahoochee, that's up there through town.
Right.
You've got Chattahoochee, Fulton / Gwinnett.
TW.
Yeah. I will say the only downside to that stocking thing, if you're a fly fishing purist, you do have to understand that a lot of spin guys, stuff like that, they get that stocking report. They know. I can just tell you from experience on some of the holes up here, the day it's stocked, it is just loaded.
Yeah.
I mean, you can clear out a little stocking hole pretty quick. Jeremiah had a question on up a little bit about what do you do basically with these little nymphs, these hooks? Because we talked about how small the hook was. When you get a trout that has one that's either swallowed it or way on in the back, so not as to damage the fish, you want to let it go as best you can. How do you handle that fish?
Well, it just depends on how far down it is. Most of the hooks will rust out after a while, and so if it's barbless, it'll fall out by itself usually. And if you can't, you try to get it. If you have forceps, try to get it out, but just be gentle. Don't touch the gills.
Yeah, you got to handle trout.
You can't touch you can't be sticking your finger in the gills. You can't be sticking the thumb in the gills. So it won't last.
And Jeremiah too, I'd follow up and say that at this point I have caught more trout that had already had a hook in the back of their throat and line coming out of their mouth than I have had to fatally wound a fish. In fact, personally, I've never fatally wounded a trout, proud to say, barbless, but my little brother, I'll call him out, he was using a barbless stonefly on the Chattahoochee, little rainbow, got eager, took it to the back. First time we've ever seen it. Really, when you're tight line fishing, the sensitivity is there so much if you're fishing properly that you're really getting them in the very tip of the lip. And so very, very rarely is it a situation where that trout is inhaling the fly and then taking a second gulp. It's usually they might take a bite and spit it immediately. And so very, very rarely maybe with something like an egg pattern where a fish is really sold on it because they think they're still in that pellet feeding mindset or scarcity mindset, they might swallow it down. But especially you throw barbless hooks, it's very, very rarely going to happen. And
do you cut the line like Peter said, as close to the hook as possible? Just cut it and
right.
leave it.
So I've caught trout that had another 6 to 10 inches of mono coming out of the back of their throat where I couldn't see a hook. All I saw was a swivel hanging. At that point, I'm just cutting the line as close to the mouth as possible and sending them on their way. I've also caught trout that had monofilament coming out of their rear end. Dangling a foot or two. So it goes through the system to an extent. I hope that hook rusted out at some point in the gut, but it was cool to see that. I would say it's been interesting to see. It's kind of sad how many fish are actually picking up these bait rigs once people are breaking off their terminal tackle on the bottom of the river, and then I end up catching that fish. Like, oh, there's 2 lines hanging out of this fish's mouth. What's going on? And they're
I hooked
coughing up power bait in the net.
Especially on the hoops, you'll hook on you'll as your fly line goes through, you'll hook on a piece of line that somebody broke off. I hooked on one that was like 15 feet long, and there was a fish on the other end of it.
No, really?
Yeah.
Hey, it happens. Jeremiah, do you turn over rocks in streams looking for larvae to match your fly to? This, of course, getting very limited experience. I do know that when we fished the lakes in Montana, they made us wear waders in the lakes because of the larvae and stuff. When we got done fishing, we walked out. There was all kinds of bugs on our legs and stuff like that. So that was interesting. Now, as far as and that's a very easy tell. You walk out, you see them.
Right.
But as far as going into a stream and turning over rocks, stuff like that, do you do that, or do you just kind of know, hey, at this time of part of the year, it should be this?
If it's a new stream, I'll go to the local fly shop.
Okay, yeah,
that's the easiest way to do it. If there's no fly shop close, I may, but most of the time, I don't fish too many new streams lately. I'm hopefully going to do this comp in a couple of weeks. It'll be a new stream. That'll be interesting. But I'll ask people more than you can get some good intel. But again, you're trying to get close. You're not going to match it 100%.
Perfect. That actually, you said comp again, so I want to bring that back up because there was a comment on up that said, let's say I'm interested in possibly getting into this competition fly fishing, but I'm a newbie. I don't know if it's for me. Maybe some advice. I forget who put the comment up there, but maybe some advice on how to figure out whether this is for me or not.
Well, I think the first thing to do is go to flycomps.com or southeastflyfishingleague.org because that'll link you to flycomps.com. On there, you'll see the comps. It'll tell you the river, it'll tell you the dates. Most of the time, you can just go and watch one. Would be my guess. If you can't get in it, go and watch one because then you can see what happens during the sessions. You can watch the anglers because these guys, we got some of the best fishermen in the East Coast fishing in the Southeast right now, and you can get a variety of people like Austin that's on this chat and folks like Nick that they've been 1-2 in the last couple of comps up in North Carolina, and so it's pretty exciting to see that and just watching those. And some of the ones that are on public, you just go there and watch, of course, as well. But a little harder because usually a lot more people around on the public ones that we do.
Have you ever fished a comp?
I have. It's been a few years. Really, I was lucky enough to kind of get in with some of the local anglers who had been fishing comps for maybe several years up to that point, if not more. And so as I was in early high school or late middle school, I kind of transitioned from that indicator bobber nymphing to tightline or competition style. And part of that was just because some of these gentlemen that I was meeting on the river from the North Georgia Trout Online Forum were in the competition swing. Basically, they'd maybe been fishing them for a year or two and had already kind of gotten that jump on tightlining and were really some fantastic mentors on the hooch. And so that that Euro style nymphing has been absolutely deadly. And I would say that seeing the difference in the amount of fish landed what I felt like I was proficient indicator nymphing. That was how I started. I kind of cut my teeth learning to catch fish with the bobber, adjusting the bobber, how to get those flies, ticking the bottom just right so that those fish are going to eat them and the rig is sensitive enough so that you'll be able to detect the bite. And then moving from there to Euro nymphing was kind of scary because is just another leap into a new technique and not knowing how is this going to be, and knowing that those first few trips are probably going to be kind of tough on the catching side.
It took me a good 6 months to be comfortable Euro nymphing, because I started
Right
after I got back into fly fishing. I was using some indicators and stuff like that, and then I'm like, oh, I'll watch a couple of videos and talk to people, and had a lesson or two, and it's getting to that's why if you're going to start, not everyone might agree with this, but have a heavier bottom fly, just so you can have that connection between your top of your rod and that fly as it goes down the stream.
And I still lean on that.
Yeah,
with that,
because you don't have to worry about slack, because that 4 millimeter bead on the bottom fly is going to keep that fly down there, and you can keep that tension on that line.
Okay. Since Austin, I know Cody kind of give an answer to this, but Austin sent this thing 3 times, so it's got to be important. It's
a story.
Pebbles.
It is a story. So here we go, man. The loaded questions.
Sounds like my Tallulah competition.
Well, there's certain rules in competition where just don't mess with people's beats if you're not fishing them. And we had an issue where someone messed with Austin's beat before he fished it, and there was a witness. And you're really just not supposed to throw anything into a beat. You're not supposed to walk through a beat. You're not supposed to do anything to a beat. And so that's what Austin is talking about.
Okay, I got you. Well, let's kind of play off of that question right there. For somebody like me who's not familiar, you get into say I go up here to Amiclola, got me some waders, going to get in there. How much commotion is too much commotion, and do you approach a spot from upstream, downstream, however you're trying to get in on these fish? What is the best, easiest way to not be detected in a trout stream?
I mean, just being stealthy is key. If you don't know the river, being stealthy and approaching it from up from the downstream.
You go downstream up like that. Okay.
Yeah. So those fish are facing nose up into the current, and so when that current is coming straight at them, they're basically face on, and so that's because the current is essentially their conveyor belt opportunity for food. And so if they're not paying attention, looking forward at that food coming right at them, then they're not going to see it. And so that is how they're positioned. And so if you can come up from below them downstream, where you imagine their vision is kind of like that. And so if you're approaching from that backside, you're in the clear. If you're coming down from straight on top of them, there's a decent chance that they're going to see you. You throw in a factor of a mirror flat surface. Maybe you've got a pool that's 6 or 7 feet deep. I believe I was told something along the lines that for every foot of water that they are deep, their total range of view above the surface is expanding. And so if they're 6 feet down, man, they've got a wide view of peripheral and all of the above, especially with it being flat. Now, what I found is that when the water's really, really broken, you've got runs and riffles that are really broken on the surface of the water. You can't see down, they can't see up. These fish are in potentially shallower water, feeling comfortable feeding, facing upstream. Right. Because they're comfortable that a bird is not going to be able to see them from straight above with that broken water. And so just kind of keeping that in mind and approaching from downstream, you're really able to sneak up on a lot of fish that you'd be surprised how close you can get and fool them, and they never even knew you were there.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. So now for somebody that's more a little on the inexperienced side, you're making a cast upstream. Say you found this rock. Here comes the current. It breaks. We got that little dry spot behind it. Do you cast and you're coming upstream, you're looking at it. When you make your cast, do you try to land that fly right into the dead water behind the rock, as close to the rock as you can, or do you throw past it and let it drift into that area?
Yes.
So
I knew that was going to be the answer.
A little bit of both. I picture, when there's a rock in the middle of the current, you've got a direct kind of a dead area directly behind it, and that water is pretty much like frog water. You could watch a bubble circle around in there pretty slow for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then on each side of that rock, the current that's being pushed around, you've got these current seams. So you've got a seam on this side where the fast water meets that slow seam, and then same with the other side of the rock.
And you also have the spot in front of the rock too that trout will fish.
Right.
There's usually a kind of soft spot right in front of that rock.
Oh, I never thought about the front of the rock.
Yeah, there's a fish that I was able to feed in the last comp. He was right above a big run in slack water, but he's right in front of the rock, and he was just sitting there because it was that's where he wanted to be, and I was able to get my fly right in front of his nose, pounced on his nose, and he ate it.
That's interesting. I never thought about it in front of the rock like that.
And I think that water just kind of
Bush water is real.
It almost goes 50-50 on each side and leaves just a little pocket.
A dead area.
I mean,
from the
directly.
rock.
Yeah, you're just like dissecting. You're not just going to one spot every single time. You're gonna probably start on this side of the rock, maybe go behind the rock, go in front of the rock, on the other side of the rock, and just different ways.
Interesting question. Again, this might be loaded because I don't trust you guys tonight. What's your guys' input on fishing directly upstream?
It's good technique. I've done it. You can.
What's he mean by directly upstream?
You're pretty much just facing upstream and you're casting.
Kind of like what I was describing. Kind of
you're
going walking up and you're just casting.
Yeah, you have to learn a couple different techniques. With dry dropping, you can do it dry dropping. You just have to make sure you're stripping that line as fast as possible. You can if you're urine you can it's called vectoring, where you just you're pulling that line, but you're still keeping that fly at the level that you want it to be without going up and down the water column.
Right. And so I would say when you're fishing across from you, you're more so able to adjust your drift and the depth of your drift with your rod angle and your wrist angle as well. When you're straight upstream, any kind of tweaks other than letting those flies just go straight to the bottom and barrel downstream at you are going to kind of pull those flies towards you because you're casting straight upstream. And so I would say you almost have to be a little bit more cautious or slower in your line management to make sure you don't pull those flies downstream double fast and kind of mess up that drag-free drift like what we were talking about earlier. Right. And so definitely have to fish it a little bit different line management wise.
If you want to see
catch them that way,
fish awesomely, go watch Austin fish on any comp. If you want to learn about it, he's the guy.
He's the man. All that.
He won. He was the top angler last year in Southeast.
That's awesome. Okay, so we're almost about 2 hours, which is generally about that. I knew when we were talking upstairs and we wrote down all these things that we would not cover 1/10 of what we were going to talk about. But I want to give each one of you some time to either shout out your social media so guys on here can go follow you, or B, shout out your tournament trail, stuff that you do, just so I make sure that I get it on camera. So if you want to start with you.
So yeah, definitely. I am Trout Raider on Instagram. You'll see a lot of fishing pics. You'll see a lot of food pics because I love to cook. So that's
awesome. Yeah, that's what I like.
Yeah, I do a lot of barbecuing, my big green egg and all that stuff. So
good for you.
You see a lot of that too. Team Dedriff is the team I'm on. He's talking about the cap. We have a Facebook page. Like I said, southeasternflyfishingleague.org has a list of all the tournaments, or a link to all the tournaments. It has a link to all the teams that are available, and it'll just more information as the years go. It's something that I run. I keep updated as much as I can. And Fly Comps is really where all the comps are listed.
Okay.
So you can go there. There's registrations that happen. They happen on a timeline. They usually
is that a .com or a .org or
Flycomps is .com, and Southeastern Fly Fishing League is .org.
Perfect.
Okay, so he can type that in there. All right, young man, what about you?
Right.
Got the phone out.
I've got a couple events coming up.
All right, let it out there.
Trout fishermen across the state of Georgia and northern neighboring states. You know, we've got all kinds of community efforts going on and fun events to go out and meet people and learn more about trout fishing. And so, you know, I got written down here, there are trout in 38 out of 50 states. So,
yeah, might as well.
Figure them out. You know, you're going to get out to Colorado. Hopefully you get out to Colorado, Alaska, Yellowstone, sometime with the missus, hitting the national parks. There's no spotted bass lakes in Yellowstone.
There's not. I look for them.
So
I look.
Hey, man.
There's stickers.
I look, though.
Right. But, man, you could have a whole lot of fun on some trout.
I had a lot of fun.
So, you know, you guys don't downplay them. You know, these trout, you can find public trout in Georgia up to 20 plus pounds, and that's on the Chattahoochee tailwater down here. So, you know, you might be thinking, oh, these little trout are about 8 inches, 10 inches. Why do I want to catch these things that aren't fighting? No, I mean, you can catch 23, 24, 28-inch trout. And let me tell you, if you've never had a trout that size pulling drag, it'll make you want to double down on fly fishing. I'll tell you that. So
Okay.
going off that, some events that are coming up, if you're in the Atlanta area this weekend watching now, you've got the Atlanta Fly Fishing Show starting tomorrow. It's the first day that they've had first show in Atlanta that they've had enough support that they're actually holding a full three-day
Excellent.
expo at the
Excellent.
Atlanta Fly Fishing Show, and that is the February 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So you can see it until this Sunday. It's really going to be a lot of local businesses and all that going out, as well as some fantastic seminars and stuff. Over here towards our Hooch area, you've got a Crayfish Creek work day on March 4th. And so this is a tributary. This is a little creek that flows into the upper Chattahoochee. They determined that the dam releases from Buford Dam on our tailwater were really drawing a lot of silt and sedimentation out into our river and really silting in some of these awesome brown trout spawning areas and some gravel beds. And so this has been, I think,
Several year project.
multiple years in the making at this point.
They got a donation.
And
or
so,
grant or something like
they
that, too.
expected it to be $20,000 project, and then they got another 50,000 donated, and then they got up to $100,000+. And so it's been featured as a Trout Unlimited success story as far as our, I want to say it's called Build a Stream Project. And you can check that out at crayfishcreek.org for that work day coming up. Hey, save the browns. We want as many wild brown trout as we can on the river.
Absolutely.
They're a blast to catch. And
They are fun. I will say that.
And they're pretty too. So show up for that. That's crayfish with a Y, crayfishcreek.org. And March 25th, you've got Sweep the Hooch held by Chattahoochee Riverkeeper. That is going to be a one-day cleanup that really encompasses sweeping the hooch, and that's from Helen down to Columbus, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it was 16 or 18 different volunteer sites. So whether you're up there in the mountains or down there towards Columbus, there's probably an opportunity near you to help remove some trash from the river.
That's
And
good.
the fish appreciate it. Last year, they removed almost 60 tons of trash removed from the hooch in 1 year, in one annual calendar year.
I don't doubt that.
And so it's really a sad state of affairs. If you can get out there and help the hooch, man, get some volunteer hours, Boy Scouts, high school students, get those youngins out, get the volunteer hours. It's a great opportunity. That's on chattahoochee.org. And that's a great opportunity, as well as some of their other sporadic cleanup events throughout the year that they have scheduled. You also have April 29th, you've got the Trout Fest, downtown Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge, yes.
Really cool. If you've not been to downtown Blue Ridge yet, that was a super cool event last year. I think was the first annual that they'd held. There were all kinds of folks from the community and guide services from around Georgia really out there promoting themselves and meeting folks, and even some guests from out of state, food trucks, slushies. It was summer and warm. Bring the kids out. There was live music. It was really a blast. We went up and camped in the mountains and then stopped by on our way down.
Made it a weekend and
down
home.
There
you go.
And so
there you go.
It was a lot of fun. And really, the last thing coming up immediately in this near spring, summer, you've got a work day on Long Creek. This is a tributary that flows into the Nuntutla River, Nuntutla Creek up there in North Georgia. And it is mostly, if not entirely, wild trout. And so we've talked about naming wild streams, but there are some of these streams that are on the decline, whether they're mentioned or not, and they need some help. And so a number of these streams are really getting worked on pretty much on a year-to-year basis. In the past, we were seeing 2 or 3 of these work projects a year. This year, I've only seen one scheduled that I'm aware of. I think the U.S. Forest Service, Fish and Wildlife, they've cut back support. So I think the more volunteers that could get out there and help create these stream structures and these small streams in the mountains that maybe have silt, maybe the habitat could support more trout, but it's just too shallow. And so they'll go out, deepen holes, add in logs that are braced in the bank, and really adjust the flow of the river with some real fishery science put in consideration put behind it, and really create some really cool fishing holes. And if you've ever been in the mountains and come across one of these stream projects, you'll realize the importance and the opportunity of fishing and habitat that these really create for our wild trout, which are special in the mountains. So that's what I've got. There's plenty coming up.
What
in
about
North
your
Georgia.
social media?
Social media, you could see my videos on Mad Fishing Skills on YouTube.
Okay.
Mad Fishing with no G, Skills with a Z. I post YouTube fishing videos, my adventures on the Chattahoochee and in the North Georgia mountains, and sometimes saltwater, wherever I can get to. I'm a
I got you.
equal
There you go.
opportunist fisherman, and the same handle for Instagram as well. So
Okay, that's
I
excellent.
appreciate it.
Any final words?
Come fly fishing. Come watch us.
Yeah.
And see what it's like, and maybe you'll get hooked like I did.
Okay, and any final words from you? You had a lot right there, which was good. That was good information,
Right.
And people need to take more initiative into getting out there. And that goes for lakes, rivers, everything. We got to take care of it.
Right,
Sure,
man.
like that.
Earn you some good fishing karma. Get out, pick up a can
I like
off the
that.
bottom of the river,
Yep.
help create a stream structure, meet some fishermen you never thought you'd meet. Maybe they'll tell you a few spots. It's really cool, the community that is available if you just kind of immerse yourself into it. And so I've been lucky to do that over the past few years, and I hope y'all are able to do the same.
That's awesome. And Peter, you had a question. What's the date? I don't know which particular event you're talking about. So you can go back and watch them. Or
Yeah, March 25th was that Sweep the Hooch. That's the day that everyone is cleaning the river.
Yeah.
February 14th is the closing for those signups. So if you can get out that March 25th date, I believe February 14th is the day that the signups open on that chattahoochee.org for the River Keeper. Then you've got April 29th, the Blue Ridge Trout Festival. May 20th, the Wild Trout Work Day up in the mountains. in
okay,
Blue Ridge.
that is awesome. That is awesome. And so again, I want to take the time. I know we're going a little over. First of all, I want to I appreciate you guys for taking the time to come up here. I know, and I told you, we can make the best plans in the world, but the viewers really drive the show. And so we had a lot of great information tonight, especially from the beginner aspect. I'd like to go ahead and invite you two back in a couple of months as we're getting into the spring. Maybe we can get a little more in depth on what we wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Stuff like that. So the invitation to you two is open. We'll get with Paul, and if you guys can come back, that would be awesome.
Sounds good.
Paul, thank you for running the mics and all that stuff tonight. You do a fantastic job, and
We pushing buttons.
that's right. You do a great job. And the biggest thanks of all is to you guys that are watching tonight, or if you're watching at a later date. You have no idea how much we appreciate you guys for taking the time to join us. I saw a comment that said, "Great podcast, guys." Listen, the honest thing with all that is it can be no better than the people that are watching us. So if we had a great podcast, it's because we had great people chiming in tonight. Again, we thank you guys for watching us. Next week, what we got going next week, Paul?
We're going to have allegedly the best fishing guide in North Georgia.
Mr. Eric Crowley
Mr.
is
Eric
supposed to
Crowley.
be here next week. And
Allegedly.
Nice.
listen, well, I can tell you what,
I saw that one.
you saw that his fans.
He won a fan vote.
He won a
Yeah, I
fan
saw
vote
that.
by a landslide, is all I'm
Nice.
gonna say. So we'll have Eric in the house next week. But again, I want to go ahead and make sure you two guys get back on the books to come back, because both of you had great information. You spoke well, and I appreciate you
Sounds
guys
good.
for
Appreciate
doing that.
Thank you very
Guys,
much.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Hey,
I
listen,
appreciate it.
if you're on the water this weekend, whether you're in the river, you're on a lake, and all that, first of all, be careful. Take care of the places that are around you. Make sure you introduce a kid or somebody that's not familiar with fishing into the sport, because fishing is like golf. It's one of the few things you can do from the time you can walk to the time the good Lord takes you home like that. You can do it 90 years old. You can be out there fishing and enjoying it and taking care of what we got. Again, this was a great little trout primer. Again, we're going to start adding a lot more of the other species into our program and stuff like that. So you guys that watch this tonight, we appreciate you guys. Have a great weekend. Ryan's going to be on Lake Allatoona with Jonathan Farmer next week, doing the live on Tuesday. But here's the kick, a little bit different. They're not just going fishing for the first half. They got to fish a certain bait, whoever's running the boat at the front, which I think it's going to start off with Jonathan. Ryan has to fish with what Jonathan's fishing, and then about halfway through, they're going to swap. And Ryan's got the keys to the boat, and whatever Ryan's fishing, Jonathan is fishing, but they only get one bait apiece. So it's a little bit of a challenge aspect with that. You guys make sure you join us on all our social media and stuff like that. Let's take this fishing to sport to the next level. We can't do it without you guys. Y'all have a great weekend. We'll see you next week on the Livewell with Mr. Eric Crowley. Enjoy yourself.